Everyone says that. That was all the detective said. Nurse. Standing in her own living room, handcuffs biting into her wrists, hospital badge still hanging around her neck, Claire Dawson looked that man dead in the eye and made a promise she did not say out loud. Idea who you just made an enemy of. If you've ever been judged by who you used to be instead of who you've become, this story is for you. Subscribe to the channel, follow this story all the way to the end. Leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The first thing that woke her was the sound of wood splintering. A knock, not a doorbell, not even a shout from the street. The door of Claire Dawson's house came off its hinges at 2:46 in the morning with the kind of violence that is designed to terrify, and for exactly 3 seconds it worked. She sat up in bed with her heart slamming against her chest and her hand already reaching for her phone before her brain had even caught up with what was happening. Lights in her bedroom strobed red and blue through the window curtains. She could hear boots heavy, deliberate, multiple pairs pounding through her hallway. She could hear men shouting words she could not yet make out because the blood rushing through her ears was louder than anything else in the room. Then the bedroom door swung open and a flashlight hit her directly in the face. Claire Dawson, do not move. Keep your hands where I can see them. She raised both hands slowly. Carefully, the way someone raises their hands when they have spent enough years around dangerous situations to understand that sudden movements get people hurt. Not moving, she said. Her voice was steady, quieter than it had any right to be. Not moving. I'm right here. There were 4 officers crowding her doorway. She could see 2 more moving behind them in the hallway. The 6 police officers, the armor, weapons drawn, tactical flashlights sweeping her small bedroom like she might be running a weapons depot out of the closet where she kept her nursing scrubs. What is happening? She asked. Can someone tell me what is happening? Nobody answered her question. That was the first thing she registered. Not the handcuffs, not the humiliation of being pulled out of her own bed in the middle of the night. The first thing she noticed was that not a single one of those 6 officers looked surprised to see her. None of them looked like they had ever considered the possibility that there might be a mistake, expecting to find exactly what they claimed to find. And that told her something. The handcuffs went on in the hallway, metal against wrists that had spent the past 12 hours inside an operating room and to keep a 62-year-old man alive after his heart decided it was done cooperating. The medical badge was still on the nightstand. One of the officers picked it up, set it back down without a word. I want to know what you're looking for, Claire said. You'll be informed at the station, said the officer closest to her. Mid-20s, maybe. He had the look of someone who was trying very hard to seem he had done this 100 times before. I am a nurse, Claire said. Not with anger, not with panic, but with the patient, deliberate tone of someone explaining something to a person who appears to be missing critical information. I work at Mercy General. I just came off a double shift. I have been in this house for 3 hours. Whatever you think you're going to find in here, I'm not going to find it, ma'am. The young officer said, I need you to stop talking. She stopped talking, not because he told her to, because she heard something from the kitchen that made her go very still inside. And she recognized immediately because she had spent enough time around medical supplies to know exactly what it was. The sound of a sealed medication package being opened. They're the sound someone made when they were pretending to find. The difference is subtle, but it is there. If you know what you're listening for, Claire Dawson knew what she was listening for. She had known what to listen for since she was 23 years old. The lead detective came through the front door 15 minutes after his officers. He was older than the others, mid-50s, silver-haired, through the shoulders, wearing a suit jacket over a button-down shirt even at 3 in the morning. The kind of man who wanted you to know he had not been woken up for this. A man who had been waiting for this, Miss Dawson. He extended a hand that she could not shake because of the handcuffs, and she got the distinct impression that he had done that on purpose. Detective Aaron Mitchell, I apologize for the hour. Do you? she said, almost smiled. We have a warrant for your residence. I'll be searching the premises. What are you looking for? Controlled substances, he said. Specifically medications matching serial numbers from Mercy General Hospital's pharmacy records. We have reason to believe a significant quantity has been diverted from the hospital over the past several months. Claire looked at him for a long moment. She studied his face the way she had learned to study faces years before she ever set foot in a nursing program. Looked at the set of his jaw, the steadiness of his eyes, the way his hands were loose and easy at his sides. He was not nervous, and a man who has just accused an innocent person of a serious crime should have at least some nerves. Detective Mitchell, she said, the evidence you're going to find in this house was put here by someone who wants to end my career. Is that right? The medication packaging won't match protocol. Of custody will have gaps, and the serial numbers, if you actually look at them, won't line up with the shift logs from my department. He tilted his head slightly. You seem to know a lot about what we're going to find. I know a lot about what someone in a hurry would get wrong, she said. Whoever did this was definitely in a hurry. That was when he smiled. Small, almost smile from before. A full, comfortable smile. Smile of a man who has heard every version of the thing you are saying and has long since stopped finding any of them interesting. Dawson, he said. Everyone says that. He walked away toward the kitchen. Claire stood in her own hallway in handcuffs and watched him go. At her chest, something that had been sleeping for a very long time opened one eye. They sat her in the back of a patrol car for 45 minutes while the search continued. She did not cry. She had not cried in a crisis situation since she was 19 years old, and she saw no reason to start now. Instead, she thought about the medication packaging she had heard being opened, about Detective Mitchell's comfortable smile, about the fact that the warrant had come at 2:46 in the morning, specific enough to suggest real planning, time to maximize disorientation. She thought about Thomas Reed, surfaced from somewhere in the back of her memory, like something floating up from underwater. Thomas Reed, 61 years old, admitted 3 weeks ago, after what was documented as a slip and fall at a job site. She had prepped him for surgery on a Tuesday morning. A broken collarbone, 2 cracked ribs, and the kind of bruising that made the attending physician ask twice whether the injuries were consistent with a fall. The anesthesia took him under. He had grabbed her wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong for a man in that much pain. My land, he had said. His voice was thick, cleared already from the pre-surgical medication. They want my land, and they will do anything. Tell somebody. Tell somebody who matters. She had squeezed his hand and told him he was going to be fine. She had assumed it was the medication talking. Fear, disorientation patients said unexpected things before surgery all the time. Documented it as patient communication during pre-op, the way she was trained to. And then she had gone into the operating room and focused on keeping Thomas Reed's heart beating. I had not thought about it again until she was sitting in the back of a patrol car at 3 in the morning, watching officers carry bags out of her home. They will do anything. Our door opened. A uniformed officer leaned in. We're transporting you to the station. I want my phone call, Claire said. I get it at the station. I know I'll get it at the station. I'm telling you right now that I am going to use it. The officer paused, and she could see him trying to figure out what to make of her. She was not behaving the way people behave when they are guilty. She was not behaving the way people behave when they are innocent and terrified. She was behaving like someone making a plan, as she was. Her attorney's name was Sandra Voss, and she had been asleep when Claire called, and she was fully awake and sharp as a blade within 30 seconds of answering. Because Sandra Voss had spent 22 years as a defense attorney, and she had a gift for that particular transition. Tell me everything, Sandra said. Start with what you heard, what you saw. So Claire told her, all of it, of the packaging, the timing of the warrant, the way Mitchell had smiled, the serial numbers she had mentioned, and the way he had not reacted to that, not even a flicker of curiosity, which meant he either already knew they were wrong, but he did not care. He didn't care, Sandra said, almost to herself. That was my red. Someone above him told him not to care. Sandra was quiet for a moment. Claire could hear her moving, the sound of a coffee maker in the background. Okay? Here's what I need you to do. Don't say another word to anyone at that station. Not about the medications, not about your shift, not about anything. If they ask you what you had for dinner, you look at them and you breathe. I know, Claire said. Claire, I know, Sandra. This is serious. I know it's serious. I'm the one in handcuffs. She paused. But there's something else. There's a patient, Thomas Reed. I need you to find out if anything has happened to him since his discharge. A beat of silence. Kind of anything. Anything that looks like pressure. Anything that looks like someone following up on a job that wasn't finished. Sandra's voice shifted slightly. Not worried exactly, but calibrated, precise. Claire, what is it that you know that I don't know yet? Claire thought about it for a moment. How much to say? About what could and could not be traced to a jail phone call. Nothing yet, she said finally. I just have a feeling. Your feelings have a history of being correct, they do. Then I'll find out about Reed. I'll breathe and you wait for me. The call ended. The corrections officer gestured for her to return to the processing area. Claire Dawson walked down that hallway with her head up and her shoulders level and her mind running very fast and very quietly behind her eyes. The process took 2.5 hours. During that time, she answered the questions she was legally required to answer and nothing else. She gave her name, her address, her date of birth. She confirmed she understood her rights. She said nothing about the medications, nothing about Mercy General, nothing about Thomas Reed, nothing about the way Detective Mitchell's ease had told her everything she needed to know about whether this operation had come from inside or outside the department. The officer processing her was a woman named Torres, late 30s, methodical, professional. She did the job without theater, suspected. At one point, Torres looked up from the paperwork and said, "You're a surgical nurse." Trauma department, Claire confirmed. Claire looked at her for a moment, just a moment. Then she looked back down at the paperwork. 2 words. But the way she said okay contained something. Hesitation. The kind that lives between what you are required to do and what your instincts are telling you about the situation in front of you. Claire filed that away. She was filing a lot of things away. At the time Sandra arrived at 5:30 in the morning, Claire had mapped the visible portion of the problem with reasonable confidence. Claire had been prepared in advance. The evidence had been placed in the house. She was certain of that by someone with enough knowledge of medical supply chains to know what to take, but not quite enough knowledge of hospital protocols to know how to package it correctly. The raid had been coordinated with enough police resources to make her look dangerous. The actual investigative documentation she suspected would be thin. The real question was not whether she would beat this charge. The real question was who was frightened enough of Claire Dawson, a surgical nurse with a clean record and a quiet life, to manufacture a crime against her. Came through the door of the consultation room looking like a woman who had already made 3 phone calls and was disappointed by all of them. She sat down across from Claire, set a folder on the table, and at her for a long moment. Thomas Reed was visited at home twice in the past 2 weeks, Sandra said. Representatives of a company called Silver Ridge Development. The second visit, his neighbor called it in as a disturbance. Nothing on record after that. Claire was quiet. The medications they found in your home, Sandra continued, logged against 2 serial sequences that don't match the current Mercy General pharmacy system. Batch rotation that ended 8 months ago. Which means either they came from very old hospital inventory, or they came from somewhere else entirely. Someone who had access to outdated hospital records, Claire said. Someone who did their research but not quite enough of it. Sandra opened the folder. I've already filed an emergency motion challenging the evidence integrity. A preliminary hearing in 48 hours. The chain of custody documentation for the evidence has gaps significant enough that I think we can get this dismissed before it ever reaches a grand jury. She paused. There. I know. That's the legal problem. I'm asking you about the other problem. The one that put you in this building tonight. Claire leaned back in the chair. She was tired in a way that went past sleep deprivation. Articular tiredness of someone who can feel the shape of a situation closing in around them and has not yet decided how to respond to it. Wants something, she said. And whatever it is, I'm in the way. Either because of something I know, or something I saw, or something someone thinks I'm capable of. Which is it? Probably all three. She pressed her fingertips together. Sandra, when you were looking into Thomas Reed, did you find anything about a redevelopment project? A rezoning application, a land acquisition, anything like that? Sandra's expression changed. Ridge Development has an active application to rezone a corridor of land on the east side. 40 acres total, multiple parcels, multiple owners, and Reed is one of them. Reed's property is the largest contiguous parcel in the corridor. The project can't move forward. Claire was very still. Outside the consultation room, she could hear the sounds of the station going about its business. Phones ringing, voices in conversation, normal sounds, patterns of a system that had been used last night for something that was not normal at all. Get me out of here, she said quietly. I need to make a phone call. To whom? Claire hesitated. For 6 years, she had not spoken that name aloud. For 6 years, she had maintained the careful, considered distance between who she was now and who she had been. She had built that distance with hard work and sacrifice and deliberate choices, and she did not give it up lightly. But some distances collapse under the right amount of pressure. Someone from a long time ago, she said. Someone I should have called before I walked away. Sandra looked at her across the table. Question in her eyes that she was professional enough not to ask. I'll have you out by noon, was all she said. She was released at 11:47 in the morning of the building into bright autumn sunlight with a paper bag containing her personal items, date 48 hours away, and a very specific kind of clarity that comes to people who have spent a night in a cell working through a problem without distraction. The house had been resealed. Sandra had arranged for a locksmith to secure what was left of the front door. The inside was a ruin of turned-over furniture and open drawers, and the kind of thorough disarray that is left behind by a search that was not really designed to find anything, only to create the appearance of having found it. She moved through the house without cleaning. She was not ready to clean yet. Cleaning was for when the situation was resolved. Right now, looking at the disruption helped her think. It helped her see the edges of what had been done to her. Bedroom closet had been searched in a pattern that told her the officers had been looking for a specific size container, not just rummaging looking, which meant they knew the dimensions of what they were supposedly going to find, which meant the evidence had been tailored, which meant someone had given very specific instructions. The kitchen had been searched differently, faster, less systematic. That was where she had heard the packaging sound. That was where they had placed what they claimed to find. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the pulled-out drawers, and she thought about the difference between a search and a performance. Then she went to her bedroom. She opened the nightstand drawer. She moved a few things inside it, a pen, a charging cable, an old photograph she never looked at directly but never moved. She found what she was looking for at the very back. A ring, silver, with a particular design, worked into the metal. It had lived in that drawer for 6 years. She had put it there the morning she submitted her nursing school application as a statement to herself that she could be different, that she could choose different. She held it in her palm for a moment. She did not put it on, but she carried it to the kitchen table and she set it next to her phone and she looked at it while she made the call. The number she dialed was not saved in her phone. It was in her memory. Certain things are in memory, not because you practice them, because some information writes itself into a person too deep to be erased by time or distance or choice. Twice, a voice she had not heard in 6 years said, I was starting to wonder if I'd made up the whole thing. Despite herself, not everything, something in her chest loosened just slightly. Yes, she said. Claire, his voice was the same. Or maybe deeper with age, but the same underneath. You sound like you're in the middle of something. Someone framed me, she said, and planted evidence in my house and had me arrested last night. Well, they used medication stolen or I think purchased from medical supply channels, targeted me because I'm connected to something I don't fully understand yet. A man named Thomas Reed, a land deal, a company called Silver Ridge. There was a pause on the other end of the line. She could hear him breathing. She could hear very faintly of a highway in the background. How long ago did this happen? He asked. The arrest was last night. I got out this morning. Are you safe right now? She looked around her kitchen, pulled out drawers at the ring on the table. Right, autumn sunlight coming through the window above the sink. Now, she said. Okay, another pause, shorter this time. Give me 48 hours. Jace Clare. His voice was quiet. Not soft. Quiet in the way that certain people are quiet, the way that means they are done explaining and have moved on to doing, or stop being family. You understand that? She understood that. Always understood that. She just had not been willing to use it until right now. The people who wanted her afraid had taken everything else off the table. 8 hours, she said. Less if I can manage it. She heard him shift. The highway sound changed. Don't go anywhere. You'll be alone. Claire. Yeah. You still got the ring? She looked at it sitting on the table next to her phone. Claire. Old. The design worn smooth in places from the years it had spent against her skin before she locked it in a drawer. Yep. She said, good. A pause. Hang on. The call ended. Claire set the phone down next to the ring and sat in her kitchen chair and felt the shape of the situation shifting around her the way it shifts when a person stops reacting and starts moving. When the thing that was meant to break you instead reminds you what you are made of. Walked away from that world because she wanted to build something worth protecting. And now the world she had built was under attack. She looked at the ring, about Thomas Reed's hand on her wrist. Grip of a frightened man. Tell somebody who matters. About Detective Mitchell's comfortable smile. Everyone says that. She thought about the sound of the packaging in her kitchen at 3 in the morning and the specific pattern of the search in her closet, numbers Mutkanim, and the 8-month-old serial numbers on medications that were supposed to destroy her career. About 40 acres of land on the east side of the city and a development company with a name that sounded like money and a problem with anyone who would not move. And then she stopped thinking about it for a moment because there was something she needed to do first. To her bathroom, she showered. She put on clean clothes. She made coffee. She ate something because she had not eaten since before her shift the previous day. She needed to think clearly, and clear thinking requires fuel. Then she sat back down at the table and she began to write. Notes, not documentation, not yet. She wrote what she remembered about Thomas Reed. The exact words, the grip, the way the anesthesia had been softening his voice as he spoke, making the words drift at the edges but not changing their content. My land. They will do anything. Tell somebody who matters. She wrote the timeline she could reconstruct for the medication charges. When the pharmacy rotation she had mentioned to Sandra had ended, what that meant about when someone had acquired those medications. How long the planning would have required. She wrote down the name Silver Ridge Development and beneath it the name Victor Hale, which Sandra had mentioned in passing that morning. And she circled it and drew a line from it to the name Detective Aaron Mitchell, and she looked at that line for a long time. Comfortable man. A man without nerves at 3 in the morning. A man who smiled when she told him the evidence was planted. Not because he thought she was lying, because he already knew she was telling the truth, and it did not matter to him. The knock at her door came at 9 that evening. She had been expecting it, but not this soon. It was not Jace. It was a woman she had never seen before. 50s, hair going silver at the temples, business clothes with the jacket removed and the sleeves rolled up in a way that said she had been working all day. She had an ID badge clipped to her shirt pocket that said, Mercy General Human Resources. Dawson, the woman said. My name is Patricia Bloom. I'm sorry to come to your home. May I come in? That depends on what you're here for, Claire said. I'm here because the hospital's legal team received formal notification of your arrest this morning. She paused. I'm here because 12 members of your department have submitted written statements in the past 6 hours disputing the characterization of your record at this facility. Claire was quiet for a moment. 14 as of an hour ago. Bloom looked at her steadily. Your supervisor, Dr. Kaplan, has also requested an emergency review of the pharmacy access logs for the past calendar year. He believes the discrepancy will be found quickly. He's right, Claire said. I'll be found in hours. Yes, the legal team believes so as well. Bloom hesitated. I want you to know that the hospital is not your adversary in this situation. Dawson, I appreciate you saying that. Claire studied the woman. Claire, is there something you need from me? Or is this a courtesy visit? Bloom reached into her jacket pocket and produced a folded piece of paper. Claire, she held it out. This was submitted anonymously through the hospital's internal reporting system this afternoon. They're required to investigate all anonymous submissions. The submission itself is not confidential. Claire unfolded it. It was a printout of a document, a page from what appeared to be an internal company report. Silver Ridge Development Risk Assessment, 2 impediments. Below that, a short list, property owners, officials, and near the bottom of the list, a name she recognized immediately. Her own, but that was not the part that stopped her breathing for a moment. That stopped her breathing was the category under which her name appeared. Uncooperative owners, not legal impediments, not even witnesses. The category was labeled assets to be neutralized. Where did this come from? Claire asked. The anonymous submission system. I don't know who filed it. Bloom looked at her carefully. Dawson, if you are involved in something that goes beyond your employment situation, I'm involved in something that was done to me, Claire said. Oh. Bloom nodded slowly. Be careful, she said. I came to say, the 14 statements are on file. Log review is happening. And now you have that. She gestured at the paper. Whatever you do with it, please be careful. Claire held the paper. Hers. After Bloom left, she stood in the doorway of her own house, the house with the temporary door that the locksmith had installed, with the turned-out drawers and the searched closet, and she looked at the document in her hand. Assets to be neutralized, she had spent the last 6 years becoming a different person. She had studied and worked and sacrificed and built something real and good and worth protecting. Somewhere in an office building with a respectable name on the door, a man named Victor Hale had looked at a list and had seen her name on it and had made a decision. He had decided she could be erased. He had decided wrong. Claire Dawson folded the document carefully. She walked back to the kitchen table. She set it next to the ring. She looked at both of them for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone and she called Sandra. I have something, she said, when Sandra answered. How significant? Significant enough that 48 hours may not be sufficient. She paused. Sandra, do you have a contact at the federal level? Someone you trust? A beat. That depends on what you're about to tell me. I'm about to tell you that what happened to me is not an isolated incident. There's a list. I'm on it. Thomas Reed is on it. I think there are others. Another beat. Yes, Sandra said quietly. I have someone. Good. Claire looked at the document on the table, the ring beside it, at the particular combination of her past and her present sitting side by side in the kitchen of her small, old house. Because whoever did this made a very specific mistake. What mistake? They thought they were dealing with a nurse. Sandra was quiet for a moment. What are they actually dealing with? She asked. Claire looked at the ring. One who knows exactly how things get built, she said, and exactly how they fall apart. She ended the call. They were outside on a highway she could not see from her kitchen window. A man named Jace Morgan was already moving. 48 hours. Rivers, he had said, less if he could manage it. She believed him. Always believed him. Because some things you walk away from don't actually leave. Oh, quiet, they wait. They stay in a drawer or a memory or a phone number that you never delete because somewhere deeper than your most deliberate choices, understand that there are people who do not stop being your family just because you asked them to. Their Dawson had asked them to. and they had waited anyway. She stood up from the kitchen table and looked around the wreckage of her house, the house that someone had decided was a symbol, a warning, a demonstration of what happened to people who were in the wrong place with the wrong knowledge, and she began to clean. Because she was finished, because she was starting. She picked up the first overturned chair and set it back on its feet, and the sound it made when it settled on the floor was solid and definitive and completely ordinary. She thought, let's get to work. She had cleaned the house until 2 in the morning. Because it needed to be perfect. Because her hands needed something to do while her mind worked through the geometry of the problem. She had righted every overturned piece of furniture, pushed every pulled-out drawer back into place, and scrubbed the kitchen floor on her hands and knees with the particular focus of someone who understands that control over small things is how you maintain control over large ones. By the time she finished, the house looked like a house again, instead of a crime scene. It did not feel like home yet. It would not feel like home until this was resolved. She knew that. She accepted it. She went to bed at 2:15 and was asleep by 2:20 because she had spent enough years working trauma shifts to understand that rest was not optional when a difficult situation was ahead of you. Ocean was a luxury. Rest was a tool. She slept without dreaming. At 6:15, her phone rang. She was awake before the second ring. Up, already reaching, already alert, in the way that night shift nurses are always alert, not groggy, disoriented, just immediately present in the room and in the moment. Her on the screen was one she did not recognize. A code from 3 states over. She answered it. "You're up early," said a woman's voice. Low, unhurried, a particular quality that Claire recognized before she had even processed the words. Of someone who was accustomed to being the calmest person in a difficult conversation. "Who is this?" Claire said. "My name is Donna Reyes. Here with the chapter out of Bridgeport. Jace called me last night after he talked to you." A brief pause. "A paralegal, 12 years. I also have a background in financial investigations that is not on my current resume, but that has been useful in certain situations." Claire processed this. "He sent me a paralegal. He sent you the person who is going to find your paper trail before the other side knows anyone is looking." Donna's voice was matter of fact, not defensive, simply correcting the record. "I've already started." "Yes. Silver Ridge Development Incorporated 7 years ago. Hale is the listed owner, but the actual capitalization came from 3 holding companies that all trace back to a man named Gerald Foss. Foss has a history of land acquisition projects in secondary markets, previous projects in other states. Both involved regulatory pressure on private landowners. One in Kentucky, one in Tennessee." She paused. "Both also involved local law enforcement cooperation that was never formally investigated." Claire was very still. "Others," meaning Mitchell isn't the first. Mitchell is not the first, the second, and probably not the last. These people have a playbook. Find properties they want. They apply legal pressure where they can, and other kinds of pressure where they can't. Someone who poses a risk to the acquisition witnesses, advocates, vocal neighbors gets managed. Managed, Claire repeated. Third, they use in their internal documents is neutralized. Said it the same way Claire had read it on the page that Patricia Bloom had brought to her door. That, clinical, a business word for something that was not business at all. "I've seen the document you were sent. The hospital employee who submitted it, we think we know who it is. I'll get to that. What matters right now is that there are 6 other names on that list besides yours and Reed's. 6 others. Claire pressed her back against the headboard and looked at the ceiling. "Who are they?" 3 property owners in the corridor. A city planning official who raised procedural objections to the rezoning application. A journalist who was asking questions about Silver Ridge 4 months ago and then stopped. A retired judge named Eleanor Marsh who sits on a land use advisory board. The journalist who stopped asking questions, Claire said. What happened to her? A beat. She was charged with a DUI. Offense. Lost her press credential. The case is still pending. The shape of it was becoming clear. Not improvised. Methodical. Patient, the kind of operation that relies on the reliability of institutional systems, on the fact that a DUI charge is just a DUI charge, a medication theft charge is just a medication theft charge. Well, someone takes the time to put all the charges on the same table and look at who they happen to. Others. Has anyone put this together before this morning? Claire asked. Not formally, not with documentation. Donna paused. I'm building. But Claire, I need access to something I can't get from public records. What? The pharmacy access logs from Mercy General. Sandra mentioned that Dr. Kaplan had requested a review. I need the raw data, not the summary. That data will tell me exactly when those serial numbers were last active in the hospital system and who had administrative access to the legacy records. That's protected health system data. I know what it is. I'm asking if you have a contact inside the hospital who could, with appropriate legal authorization, provide access to a formal investigative request. Claire thought about Patricia Bloom, the 14 written statements about Dr. Kaplan asking for the log review within hours of learning about her arrest. I might, she said. Give me a few hours. You, Claire. Donna's voice changed slightly, not softer, or direct. Jace told me something about you. He said you have a habit of trying to handle things alone because you think asking for help means you owe someone something. Claire was quiet. To tell you, the family doesn't keep score. She did not respond immediately. There was something in that sentence that moved through her in a way she had not expected, not with sentiment. It was something more fundamental. The recognition of something true. I heard him, she said. I will. Talk later. The call ended. Claire sat in the early morning quiet of her house and breathed for a moment. She got up, made coffee, and called Dr. Kaplan. He answered on the first ring, which told her he had been awake for a while. Claire. His voice carried something that she could identify immediately as anger held under careful control. James Kaplan had been her attending physician and department head for 4 years. A precise man, a demanding one, and he had zero tolerance for anything that wasted his time or insulted his intelligence. Being told that one of his best nurses had stolen hospital medication was something that fell firmly into both categories. Who are you? Functional, she said, Dr. Kaplan. I need to ask you something directly. That's the only way I know how to have a conversation. The log review you requested. Who is running it? Internal compliance with oversight from legal. Because I need the raw data from that review to reach someone outside the hospital who is building a formal investigative file. A summary, the actual access logs, including legacy system records going back at least 10 months. A silence, long enough that she wondered if she had miscalculated. Then the serial numbers Sandra mentioned, the ones that don't match current rotation. They're from a batch that was retired 8 months ago. Someone accessed those records to create plausible-looking evidence. I need to know who. Legacy access is restricted to a very small group, Kaplan said slowly. IT administration and 2 members of pharmacy compliance. I know. Another silence. Almost hear him thinking the particular quality of silence around a man working through the implications of what he had just said. You think it's someone inside the hospital, he said. I think it's possible. Or someone who had a way to access someone inside. Either way, the raw logs will tell us. I'll call legal in 20 minutes, Kaplan said. If we can structure this as a voluntary disclosure to a formal investigation, we can move faster than a subpoena, Claire. He paused. Oh, be careful about who else you tell what you know. Oh, if there's an internal element to this, I know, she said. Careful. Good. A beat. You have 15 people in this department who are ready to go to the mat for your record. I want you to know that. 14, Patricia Bloom had said last night. Already 15 by morning, I know. Claire said again, and this time the word carried something more than acknowledgement. She meant it. She ended the call and stood in her kitchen and drank her coffee and thought about a hospital full of people who had known her for years and trusted the evidence of their own experience over a detective's comfortable smile. About what that meant. Then she put the coffee down and got to work. Jace arrived at 11:45 in the morning. She heard the motorcycle, Before she saw it, the specific sound of a well-maintained engine moving at low speed through a residential street, deliberate pace of someone who is not trying to announce themselves but is not hiding either. She was at the kitchen table with her laptop and a legal pad covered in notes when she heard it, and she did not move toward the window. She waited. It was 3 times even. Unhurried. She opened the door. Older the way she had known he would be. 60 now, as close to it, with the gray settled into his hair and a face that had more weather in it than she remembered. He was wearing jeans and a dark jacket with no insignia. He was not here in an official capacity, in any sense of the word. He was here as a person who had driven Dustin 6 hours overnight because someone he considered family had called him. He looked at her for a moment without speaking. She looked back at him. Then he said, "You look like you haven't slept enough." "I slept 6 hours," she said. "That's enough. That's what you always used to say." He came through the door when she stepped back to let him in, cornered, and he looked around the kitchen with the practiced assessment of someone who is accustomed to walking into a space and evaluating it. Eyes went to the table, to the laptop, and the legal pad, and the ring sitting at the corner next to her coffee cup. At the ring for just a moment, then looked back at her. "Tell me where you are with it," he said. She told him. "Of it, this time." The document with her name in the neutralization column. "Let's call in the morning." The 6 other names. The paralegal in Bridgeport building a financial trace, and working with legal to release the pharmacy logs. Journalist with the DUI. The pattern across 2 other states. Victor Hale in front and Gerald Foss behind him, invisible in the corporate structure, patient and methodical, and very good at using institutional systems as weapons. Jace listened without interrupting. He sat at her kitchen table, and he listened the way that certain people listen, not waiting for gaps to fill, but actually taking in the full shape of what she was saying. When she finished, he said, "How many people does Foss have inside Mitchell's department?" "I don't know yet. For certain. I think his captain is either involved or deliberately looking away. A warrant for a search of a nurse's home at 3 in the morning requires a signature above his rank. So at least 2, at minimum." Jace was quiet for a moment. The planning official, the one who raised procedural objections. His name is Daniel Cho, only on administrative leave from the city planning office. The stated reason is an internal review of a permit decision from last year. She turned the legal pad to face him. The administrative leave was initiated 9 days after he submitted a formal objection to Silver Ridge's rezoning application. Jace looked at the timeline she had drawn on the paper. He put his finger on it and traced the sequence. Then he looked up at her. "Alive. As far as I know, we need to talk to him before they decide he's more useful as a warning than as a pressure point." It was a sentence that would have meant nothing to most people. It meant something very specific to both of them, drawn from a shared vocabulary of years spent understanding how people with power operated when they decided someone was expendable. "Where Sandra's trying to locate him," Claire said. "He's not at his home address." His wife told Sandra's assistant that he's visiting family out of state. She said it in a way that made the assistant think she was reading from a note. Jace's jaw tightened. Just slightly. The only external sign of what he was feeling. Then we find him first. Donna is working the financial trace. Claire is working the legal angle. I'm going to go back to Mercy General this afternoon to meet with Kaplan, the compliance team. She paused. "What are you going to do?" He looked at her. "I'm going to go have a conversation with someone who knows something about Silver Ridge's local operation." Jace. Not that kind of conversation. He said it without any defensiveness, simply correcting a concern he had anticipated. "I don't do things that way anymore. Information has more than one path, and some paths are faster than courts and legal requests." She knew what he meant, always known what he meant. There was a network, not criminal, not now, not for many years, but a network of people who talked to each other, paid attention to things that official systems missed, had relationships with other people across industries and cities and walks of life that crossed lines that formal investigators couldn't. Drivers who moved through specific routes, machinists who worked specific sites. There were people who knew the unofficial geography of how a place operated. Stay safe, she said. That's what I used to say to you. He stood up from the table, more than she remembered, or maybe she was just seeing him in her own space for the first time. And that changed the proportions of things. He looked at the ring again. At her. I'm glad you called. I almost didn't. I know. Claire, you did. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Turned back. The people who did this to you, they made a mistake. I told Mitchell that. What he smiled. She said it flatly. No anger. He was very comfortable. Jace nodded slowly. Like that are always comfortable until the moment they're not. He pulled the door open. Tonight, keep your phone close. She did not watch him leave. She turned back to her table, to her laptop and her legal pad and the ring sitting at the corner of everything. And she sat down and opened the next document she needed to read. Because the work was the thing now. The work was what would make this right. The Mercy General Compliance meeting lasted 3 hours. Upland had assembled 4 people in a small conference room of pharmacy compliance, an IT administrator named Fong, who had been with the hospital for 11 years and had the focused intensity of someone who took system integrity as a personal matter, hospital's general counsel, and Patricia Bloom from Human Resources, coffee and legal pads and a quiet competence that Claire was increasingly grateful for. They spread the pharmacy access records across the table. Fong 40 minutes to find it. There, he said, and pointed to a line in the legacy system, log that nobody would have noticed without looking. Access this event. 8 months and 12 days ago. Legacy record batch, Delta 7. The batch that corresponded to the serial numbers on the medications found in Claire's house had been accessed by a user account that had been inactive for 14 months. Ghost account. Someone had used dormant credentials to access a closed batch of records and extract the serial number data. That account belongs to a former pharmacy technician, Fong said. He was looking at the screen with an expression somewhere between professional horror and genuine fury. The hospital 14 months ago. His access should have been terminated on his last day. Was it? The general counsel asked. The primary system, yes. Fong tapped the screen. But the legacy database runs on a separate administrative structure. It was not included in the standard termination protocol, a process gap we've been flagging to IT management for 2 years. What's the technician's name? Claire asked. Fong looked at Kaplan. Kaplan looked at the general counsel. General counsel said, within the bounds of this internal review, information can be shared with relevant parties. Fong turned back to the screen. Ryan Harwell, he left the hospital voluntarily. No disciplinary record. Where is he now? We can find out, Bloom said quietly. Already writing something on her legal pad. We'll have HR pull his exit records and current contact information within the hour. Claire wrote the name on her own pad. Ryan Harwell, a former employee, a ghost account, someone who either sold his dormant credentials or had them taken without his knowledge, or third option, someone who was still operating as a deliberate instrument. About the conversation she needed to have with Donna, about the paralegal in Bridgeport, building a financial trace, looking for the money flows between Silver Ridge and the people they had used. She wondered if Ryan Harwell's name appeared in any of those flows. Well, she was willing to bet it did. There's one more thing, Fong said. He was still looking at his screen. There was something in his voice that made the room go slightly quieter. Access event at 8 months and 12 days. That's the first one I found, because it's the most significant. But it's not the only one. Claire looked up. How many? 4 separate access events on legacy records over the past 11 months. Using dormant or inactive credentials. Different accounts each time. He turned to face the room. Whoever did this has been inside our system for almost a year. They weren't in a hurry. They were building something. The general counsel made a sound that was not quite a word. Kaplan's jaw was set in a line that Claire recognized as the outer boundary of his composure. About Gerald Foss. Patient and methodical. A playbook developed across 2 other states. Not in a hurry. Building something. Fong, she said, can you determine whether any of those other access events pulled records that correspond to other employees? But not just me. He looked at her carefully. Give me 20 minutes. He had it in 15. Their employees, all nurses, all from different departments, all with clean records. He pulled their personnel files at Claire's request, and she looked at each one. Of them she did not recognize. One of them she did. Thea Santos, trauma nurse, 12 years at Mercy General. Best surgical assist Claire had ever worked with. Currently on a leave of absence, approved 3 weeks ago. Stated reason personal. Claire stared at the name for a long moment. Thea Santos, she said aloud. Does anyone know why she went on leave? Bloom was already opening her laptop. She searched for 30 seconds, and her face changed in a way that was small, but visible to anyone paying attention. An internal complaint. 3 weeks ago, Bloom said, against a specific physician who had authority over staffing decisions in her department. What happened to the complaint? Bloom looked at her. Was dismissed. Pending review. By whom? Bloom's eyes went back to the screen. Her review was assigned to. She stopped. She looked up. Her expression was very controlled in the way that people's expressions are when they are processing something that has rearranged their understanding of a situation. The review was assigned to someone in hospital administration who has since taken an extended personal leave. She paused. And that person's personal leave began 4 days after the Silver Ridge rezoning application was filed. The room was very quiet. Claire thought about the list, the names in the column marked neutralized, about the width of the operation she was looking at. Not a targeted attack on one person, a quick fix for a land deal, but something that had spread fingers into multiple institutions. Hospital, a police department, a city planning office, spreading, patient, invisible, operating inside the legitimate structures of a community like something that had learned to mimic healthy tissue. About Thomas Reed's hand on her wrist. Somebody who matters. She looked around the table at the 4 people who had spent 3 hours pulling this apart with her. A director who was furious. A compliance director who took system integrity personally. General counsel building arguments. A human resources manager who had come to her door at 9 in the evening with a piece of paper that could have cost her position. This is who matters. Not an army, not a system, who look at something wrong and cannot make themselves look away. I need to make a call, she said, and I need to do it now, before the end of the business day. She looked at the general counsel. How quickly can you authorize voluntary disclosure of this log data to a federal investigative inquiry? Define quickly. Hours, days. He thought about it. If the inquiry has standing, what's the vehicle? A formal request from a licensed investigator working with a federal contact. The investigator's name is Donna Reyes. She's a paralegal with 12 years of financial investigation background, currently building a cross-state pattern analysis. The general counsel looked at Kaplan. Kaplan looked at Claire. And Kaplan said something she had not expected him to say. But he said, whatever she needs. We sign off today. 3 hours ago, Claire had walked into this room knowing she was innocent and not knowing how far the infection went. She walked out of it with 4 signed authorizations, a copy of every access log Fong had flagged, and the name Ryan Harwell written at the top of her legal pad with 3 lines under it. Called Donna from the hospital parking lot. Harwell, Donna said immediately. That name appeared in a consulting payment record 2 months ago. Ridge paid a company called Harwell Technical Services $4,000 for what was listed as system audit consulting. Of course they had. He's the inside link, Claire said. He's one of them. And 2 others today. A records clerk at the city planning office. Now paused, and the pause was the kind that precedes something significant. A dispatcher at the police department, 14-year employee. Mother-in-law is listed as a site manager for a Silver Ridge subsidiary. A dispatcher. Someone who would know exactly when a warrant had been signed, when patrol cars were deployed, who would be able to communicate the timing of an operation to someone outside the department without raising any flags at all. And when to have the evidence placed, Claire said. It came together in her mind with a horrible clarity. Timing of the raid, the specific hour. The evidence already in the house when the officers arrived. They knew the warrant window, They knew exactly how long they had, and they used it, Donna said. There. This is bigger than one corrupt detective. Members, this is an organized operation using legitimate institutional access as its infrastructure. Enforcement, hospital systems, city administration. Us has built something that looks exactly like normal business from every angle you approach it from individually, until you put all the angles in the same room, which is what I'm doing. Another pause. I'm sending everything I have to the federal contact tonight. Claire gave me the name. But Claire, I need you to understand something. When this hits a federal desk, the other side will know. Not immediately, but soon. These things leak. And when they know, they'll move faster, Claire said. Try to finish what they started. The names on that list who haven't been touched yet: Cho, Maria Santos, they become a priority. She thought about Daniel Cho, a city official who was supposedly visiting family out of state, but whose wife had read from a note. About Eleanor Marsh, the retired judge on the land use board. About Maria Santos, the best surgical assist she had ever worked with, currently on a leave of absence with a dismissed complaint and a phantom in the hospital's legacy database quietly pulling records with her name on them. How long before the federal contact can put protective resources around those people? She asked. I don't know. It depends on how fast they can verify what we're sending them and how seriously they take it. Make them take it seriously. Working on it. A beat. Jace is working something on his end. He said to tell you he found something about the local operations communication structure. Tell you tonight. What did he find? He didn't tell me. He said he wanted to tell you directly. Donna's voice carried a slight note of something that, a different day, in a different situation, might have been amusement. He also said to tell you to eat something because he knows how you get when you're working a problem and you forget. Despite everything, the weight of all of it, something in Claire's chest shifted sideways for just a moment. A particular warmth of being known, of being seen by someone who learned you years ago and has not forgotten. Tell him to mind his own business, she said. I will tell him that word for word, Donna said. Tonight, Claire put her phone in her pocket and stood in the hospital parking lot and looked up at the sky, which was doing nothing remarkable, just being sky, just being a Thursday afternoon in autumn, and she breathed for a moment. About Maria Santos, the leave of absence, the dismissed complaint, the records that someone had been quietly pulling from the hospital's legacy system with Maria's name on them. Clara, who did not know any of this, had filed a complaint about something that seemed completely unrelated and had been dismissed and had gone on leave and had no idea that somewhere in a company document, her name was in a column labeled neutralized. Claire pulled her phone back out and called her. It rang 5 times. 6. Then Maria's voice, cautious and slightly tired. Hello, Maria. It's Claire Dawson. A beat. Claire, I heard what happened to you. Believe, I know. I'm going to explain everything. I need you to listen to me first, and I need you to trust me. Claire kept her voice level, deliberate, the voice she used in surgical situations when she needed someone to focus. Right now? Yes. Claire, you're scaring me. Good. You should be a little scared, but not too scared, because we're going to handle this. I need you to do something for me right now. I'm on the phone with you. Okay. Maria's voice had shifted, tightened, the way a good nurse's voice tightens when she understands the situation is serious. Okay? Tell me. I need you to look around your house and tell me if there is anything, any object, a package, anything at all that you did not put there yourself and cannot account for. Silence. Of movement. Maria, walking through her own house, opening spaces, checking. Claire waited. 30 seconds. Then Maria said, in a voice that was very carefully controlled, a bag in my hall closet, behind the winter coats. Put it there. Claire closed her eyes for 1 second. Don't touch it, she said. Step away from it and call Sandra Voss. I'll text you her number right now. Tell her exactly what you told me. Open the bag. Do not move it. Do not let anyone into your house until Sandra gets there. Claire. Maria's voice was no longer controlled. It was the voice of someone who has just understood that the danger she sensed but could not name was real and present and in her own home. What is in the bag? Claire thought about the sound she had heard in her kitchen at 3 in the morning, of packaging, the sound of someone who understood what they were doing, but not quite well enough. There's evidence that was put there to destroy you, she said. Oh, they tried to destroy me, but they haven't won yet. Not going to, she paused, Maria. Do you hear me? A breath. Steadying, the specific steadiness of someone who is frightened and choosing not to be paralyzed by it. I hear you, Maria said. Good. Call Sandra. I'll be at your house in 40 minutes. She was there in 35. Sandra was already on the phone with a colleague who specialized in criminal evidence planting cases. Maria was sitting at her kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't drunk. And she looked up when Claire came through the door with the particular expression of someone who has just been shown that the ground beneath their feet was not solid and is recalibrating with effort. Sure, you knew, Maria said. I suspected. The hospital system showed your records had been accessed the same way mine were. Same method, same ghost account structure. Claire sat down across from her. A list, Maria. A list of people that a company named Silver Ridge has identified as obstacles. Don't know yet exactly why you're on it, but I know why. Maria's hands tightened around the cup. Just her face, not surprise, recognition of someone fitting the last piece into a place where it was always supposed to go. 3 months ago, a man came into my department as a patient. Car accident. He was semi-conscious when they brought him in, the way they do sometimes when the adrenaline hasn't worn off yet. He said something about being pushed, about this accident not being an accident. Claire was very still. Claire was his name. Maria looked at her. Her eyes were steady now. Arthur Pina. He owned about 7 acres on the east side. He came in, I heard what he said. I documented it as patient communication in his pre-op notes the way I'm supposed to. 3 days after he was discharged, a representative from the Silver Ridge Company came to my department. She paused. They said they were there to check on a family member, but they asked to speak to me specifically. They asked what I remembered from that shift. What did you tell them? Nothing. I couldn't discuss patient care with non-family members, and I referred them to administration. Maria was quiet for a moment, but they looked at me when I said it. They looked at me in a way that I remembered afterward. The way someone looks at you when they're making a note. A way that means you are now a problem. Claire thought about Foss's playbook, about the journalist, about Daniel Cho, about every person who had done something ordinary and correct, documented a patient, an objection, raised a procedural question, and had found themselves suddenly in the machinery of something that was designed to crush the ordinary and correct. You didn't do anything wrong, Claire said. I know, Maria looked at her. I didn't, but knowing that doesn't seem to be protection. No, Claire said. She leaned forward. That's why we're building the kind of protection that actually works. We have people working on this right now, financial investigators, and tax, federal inquiry. We have the hospital log data. Pattern. She paused. But Maria, I need to ask you something. Pina, the man who came in after the accident, do you know if he's still in contact with the hospital? Follow-up patient? He had a scheduled follow-up 6 weeks after discharge. Know if he kept it. Find out, Sandra said, from across the room. Off her phone now, watching them both. If Pina made his follow-up appointment, we can reach him through the hospital. If he's another Thomas Reed, another person sitting alone with information he doesn't know what to do with, he's another witness, Claire said. He's more than a witness. Sandra's voice had the particular quality that it carried when she was several steps ahead and pacing herself for the benefit of the room. If Pina says that accident was deliberate if he was assaulted in an accident, then we have moved from a corruption and fraud case into something with significantly more federal gravity. We have moved into attempted murder territory. The word sat in Maria's kitchen like something solid and heavy. She set down her tea very carefully. Arthur Pina is a quiet man, she said. 68 years old, retired. He lives alone. He told me her surgery that his grandchildren play on that land every summer. that he had been trying to sell it for years, but nobody ever offered what it was worth, and he was fine with that because he was not in a hurry. She paused. He sounded like a man who would not understand why someone would want to hurt him for 7 acres. Most people don't understand it until they're inside it, Claire said. And it's almost too late. Her phone buzzed on the table. Text from Jace. 3 words. Found something. Call me. Looked at it. Then at Maria. Then at Sandra. I need 5 minutes, she said. Plus, she stepped outside onto Maria's front step and called Jace back, and he answered before the first ring had completed. To someone who does site work for a Silver Ridge subsidiary, he said. No names, I'm not giving you that. But this person told me something specific. There is a scheduled city council meeting in 4 days. Silver Ridge rezoning application is on the agenda for a vote. He paused. The votes. Cho was the swing vote on the land use board recommendation. And with Cho gone, they have a clear path, Claire said. 4 days, Claire. Whatever your people are building with the federal inquiry, it needs to get there in 4 days or the project gets approved. The land gets locked up in a development contract and the legal mechanism to reverse it becomes exponentially more complicated. 4 days. And she ran the timeline in her head. Donna's financial trace, hospital log data, the federal contact Sandra had reached out to, evidence bag in Maria's closet that was now a documented second instance of evidence planting by the same operation. Possible. It was not comfortable, but it was possible. Something else, Jay said. His voice had shifted dramatically, but she had known him long enough to hear the change. Tell me, she said. The dispatcher at the department, the one who's connected to Silver Ridge through the family employment link. He paused. Her name is Linda Farrow, and I'm told by someone I trust completely that Linda Farrow has been having second thoughts. That she knows more than she was supposed to know when she got involved. That what she knows is scaring her. Claire was very still. A person with second thoughts. A person who was scared. The most valuable and the most fragile things in an operation like this. And who knew too much and was not sure anymore that the people they were working with would protect them if things went wrong. Can she be reached? Claire asked. That's what I'm working on, Jay said. Carefully. If she feels pushed, she shuts down. If she feels threatened, she goes back to the people she's afraid of, because that's what people do when they're scared. They go back to familiar danger before they go to unfamiliar safety. She understood that. Completely. Let me know when you have a way in, she said. Jace, she looked up at the sky, the same Thursday sky it had been an hour ago. Unremarkable and present. 4 days, I know. He was quiet for a beat. With less. We have talked tonight. The call ended. She stood on Maria's front step for a moment. She thought about everything that was in motion right now, the financial trace, log data, a federal contact, the second evidence bag in a closet, their Pina and his 7 acres, his grandchildren, who played there every summer. Cho, reading from a note his wife had been told to say, Pharaoh, having second thoughts in a building full of people who could not know she was having them. 4 days, she went back inside. Maria and Sandra both looked at her the moment she came through the door. Both of them had learned, in their different ways, what it meant when Claire Dawson had just received information. We have 4 days, she said, and we are not going to waste a single one of them. She sat back down at the table, opened her legal pad to a clean page, and began to write. Next morning came in hard and fast. Claire had slept 4 hours at Maria's house because Sandra had decided that neither of them should be alone until the situation was more contained. The kind of corners, and Sandra was the kind of person whose decisions on matters of personal safety had the quality of gravity. They pulled you into compliance before you finished weighing the alternative. Maria had taken the bedroom. Sandra had gone home at midnight after extracting promises from both of them that were more specific than any court document she had drafted that day. I woke up at 5:15 with her legal pad on her chest and her phone in her hand, and the immediate, clear-eyed alertness of someone who had not really stopped working during the 4 hours they were technically asleep. She had dreamed about Thomas Reed's hand on her wrist. The words, just the grip, the surprising strength of a frightened man holding on. Looked at her notes from the night before and thought about 4 days. And then she got up and made coffee in Maria's kitchen without waking Maria. Called Donna. Donna answered on the first ring. Donna had not slept either. Tell me something good, Claire said. I have something better than good, Donna said. I have something definitive. She sounded like a person who had been sitting in front of a computer for 6 hours and had arrived at the place where exhaustion converts itself into a kind of sharp, clear energy that is better than being rested. Gerald Foss. I've been tracing the money backward through the holding structure for 2 days. Last night, I found the link I needed. There is a series of payments, 11 of them, over 14 months from a Silver Ridge subsidiary to a company called Meridian Consulting Group. Meridian Consulting Group has one employee, and that employee, 8 months ago, was actively employed as a sworn officer with the city police department. Claire set down her coffee cup. Officer, she said, Captain Richard Haas. He retired 8 months ago. Retirement was processed as standard, no flags, no review. He now receives consulting fees from a company that exists for the sole purpose of receiving those fees. Donna paused. Claire Haas was Mitchell's direct supervisor for 6 years. Processed the warrant request for your home. His signature is on the authorization paperwork. The man above Mitchell's rank, a signature she had known, had to exist. The person who had looked at a warrant to raid a surgical nurse's home at 3 a.m. and had signed it without hesitation, he was not approving a warrant. He was executing a contract. Claire said. So he's outside internal affairs jurisdiction. He's outside it but not beyond it. Payments constitute corruption of a law enforcement process, a federal matter, regardless of current employment status. Donna's voice was precise. Certain. I'm attaching everything to the package for Sandra's federal contact. There's a timeline problem. 4 days. Less. Well, the city council vote is in 4 days, but I'm told the development contract itself has a signing window that opens in 72 hours. The contract is signed between Silver Ridge and the city's development authority before any federal hold is in place. They can argue the project was already underway when the corruption findings were made, Claire said. The contract becomes a complicating factor. It becomes a very expensive legal argument that takes years to unwind. Us has the lawyers for that fight. The city does not. Donna was quiet for a moment. We need the federal hold in place before that signing window opens. 72 hours. The number settled over Claire like something physical. She looked at the kitchen, around her at Maria's ordinary kitchen, coming through the window, at the ordinary texture of a life that someone had tried to dismantle, and she recalibrated. 4 days had just become 3. Does Sandra's contact have enough yet? She asked. I sent the full package at 3 this morning. 22 pages of financial documentation, hospital log data, the evidence planting timeline for 2 separate incidents, and the consulting payment records. A pause. Sandra is calling the contact at 7. When he's awake, call me the second you hear anything. I will. Donna hesitated. There, the contact is good. Sandra trusts him, and Sandra doesn't trust people without evidence. Federal processes have their own pace, and 72 hours is.
I know what 72 hours is,
Claire said. Work with what we have. Yeah. Another pause. Told me at 2 a.m. He's close on the Pharaoh situation. Well, he thinks he can have something today. He said that. He said, I'm quoting directly, tell Claire I think today, which from Jace means he's certain, but doesn't want to say certain until it's done. Despite everything, despite the weight of the 72 hours sitting on her chest, like something she had agreed to carry, Claire almost smiled. Tell him I heard him, she said, same as before. She ended the call and stood in Maria's kitchen and drank her coffee and thought about Linda Pharaoh, a dispatcher with a brother-in-law who worked for Silver Ridge, a woman who had, at some point, made a choice, maybe a small one, maybe something that seemed unimportant at the time, choices always seem at the time, and who was now living inside the consequences of it and finding them larger than she had anticipated. Claire had known people like that. In another life, She had navigated entire situations built around people like that. Person on the inside who was not quite inside, enough to be safe but too far inside to walk away clean. The person whose conscience had become the most dangerous thing about them, because the people they were working with could sense it, and sensing it made them a liability. Pharaoh needed a way out before the people she was afraid of decided she was more dangerous as a loose end than as an asset. The question was whether Jace could build that bridge before the 72 hours ran out. Maria was up by 6:30. She came into the kitchen already dressed, already purposeful, with the specific energy of a woman who had spent the night processing a difficult situation and had arrived at the decision to stop processing and start acting. Pina kept his follow-up appointment, she said. She was looking at her phone. I had a friend in medical records check the system this morning. He came in 5 weeks ago. He's in the system. She looked up. I have his contact information. Claire looked at her. Already pulled it. I pulled it 20 minutes ago. Maria held her gaze steadily. Her card. I know what you said last night about being careful about who knows what. Pina is a 68-year-old man who lives alone and told me his accident wasn't an accident. And if his name is on that list, his name might not be on the list, Claire said carefully. We find out. And if it's not, we're ahead. And if it is, Maria, stop. Claire breathed. If it is, then he's sitting in a house by himself, not knowing what's coming. And that is not something I can leave there. Claire thought about Thomas Reed, about how long he had been sitting with what he knew before he whispered it to a surgical nurse he barely had time to meet. What it cost a person to carry that kind of information alone, knowing if anyone would believe them, without knowing if telling someone would make things or considerably worse. As she said, we call him, but I make the call. Maria, I know. I listen. And you don't react to anything he says that sounds alarming. Because if you react, he hears it in your voice. And if he hears it, he shuts down. Maria nodded. She had the same understanding of human psychology that all good nurses develop the knowledge that a frightened person needs steadiness more than they need information. Oh, I'll make more coffee. Claire dialed. It rang 4 times. She was preparing for voicemail when a man's voice answered. Oh, careful. The voice of someone who had been screening calls. Mr. Pina, she said. My name is Claire Dawson. I'm a nurse at Mercy General. You were treated in my department a few months ago. A pause. I remember. He said carefully, I'm calling because I need to talk to you about something important. About your medical care. About something you said when you came in. Another pause. Longer. She could hear him breathing. She could hear the quality of his silence. Hear immediately what she needed to know. He had not forgotten what he said. Well, he had been waiting, maybe, for someone to call about it. Or dreading it. Sometimes those are the same thing. You said your accident wasn't an accident, she said. I believed you then, and I still believe you. And I need you to know that you are not alone in this situation. The silence that followed was the longest yet. She waited through it the way she waited through difficult moments in surgical suites, with complete patience, without pressure, understanding that the next sound she heard would tell her more than any words could. What she heard was a breath. Slow, the release of something held for a very long time. To my house, Arthur Pina said. 3 times. Last time I called the police. He stopped. The officer who came took my statement. He was very polite, very professional. He wrote everything down. Another stop. 2 days later, I got a letter from the city saying my property tax assessment had been reevaluated upward by 30%. Punitive. Swift, using another institutional system as a weapon. Playbook, the same patience, the same reach into ordinary civic mechanisms to apply pressure that looked like paperwork. Purse, did you know why they kept coming to your property? Claire asked. To buy it. They offered me 3 times what it's worth. I said no. He sounded neither angry nor confused about this. I told her something about Arthur Pina. He was a man who understood exactly what he had and what it was worth to him. And money had not been sufficient to change that calculation. Our grandchildren play on that land every summer. My wife is buried there. A development site. It's my home. Mr. Pina, Claire said. I need to ask you directly. When they hit your car, the accident, were you going to a meeting? Were you on your way to do something specific? A pause. Well, city planning office. I had a meeting with a Mr. Cho. He had asked me to come in to discuss the rezoning application. He paused again. Ever made it? Daniel Cho, the planning official on administrative leave. The man whose wife had read from a note when Sandra's assistant called, had been trying to gather the property owners. And he had been building the opposition from the inside of the city's own process. And someone had put a car into Arthur Pina's vehicle on the way to that meeting. The thing that Sandra had named in Maria's kitchen the previous night solidified in Claire's mind with a cold and terrible clarity. Emptied murder territory. Mr. Pina, she said, keeping her voice level and warm and exactly as steady as it needed to be. I need you to come somewhere with me today. There is a lawyer working on this situation, a very good one. And there are investigators who need to hear exactly what you just told me. You are not going to have to carry this alone anymore. A beat. She could hear him thinking, "Are you the nurse who got arrested?" he said, for exactly 1 second. "Yes, I heard about that," he said. "On the news. They said you stole medicine." He said it without inflection. As accusation, not as absolution, just as information. I didn't believe it. Why not? Because you held my hand before surgery and you told me I was going to be okay. He paused. And you were right, so I trusted your judgment. Something shifted in her chest that she did not have time for and acknowledged anyway, because it was real and it mattered. And the things that matter deserve a moment even when you don't have moments to spare. "Thank you," she said. "When and where?" he asked. They met at Sandra's office at 10 in the morning. Their Pina was smaller than Claire had remembered. From the surgical suite, people always seemed larger when they were in crisis, and their bodies were broadcasting the full intensity of their situation. In ordinary daylight, he was a compact man in his late 60s with careful hands and the kind of stillness that comes from a life spent outdoors, working with materials that do not accommodate impatience. Well, he told Sandra everything. He was methodical about it. There's specific. The way a man is specific when he has been mentally rehearsing a conversation that he did not know he would ever get to have. 3 visits, the offer and his refusal, the meeting with Cho that he never reached, police officer who wrote down his statement about the car and the letter about his property tax assessment that arrived 2 days later. Sandra was taking notes so fast her pen barely left the paper. He finished. She looked up at him. "Mr. Pina, are you willing to provide a formal sworn statement to a federal investigative authority about the events you've described?" He looked at her steadily. "Let help. Combined with what we already have, yes, significantly, then yes." He said it the way he had described his refusal to sell the land without drama, visible fear, with the solid patience of a man who has thought about something carefully and reached the end of thinking. The clean had been waiting for someone to ask. At that moment, Claire's phone buzzed on Sandra's conference table. At the screen, Jace, a text message, 3 words, "Now." Claire stood up. "I have to go." Sandra looked at her. Arthur Pina watched her with the calm curiosity of a man who has recently learned that the world is more complicated than he believed and is adjusting. "Oh," Sandra said quietly. "Pharaoh," Claire confirmed. She looked at Sandra. "Keep going. Get a statement. Be back." She was already moving. Jace had arranged it the way he arranged everything practically. Theater, with the minimum number of moving parts necessary to achieve the desired result. He had found a woman who knew Linda Pharaoh from a community organization they were both involved in. Remember, he had asked that woman, carefully and without specifics, whether she would be willing to make a call. Just a call. Just an invitation to coffee from a friend on an ordinary morning. Linda Pharaoh did not know she was meeting Claire Dawson. She knew she was meeting a friend for coffee at a place she had been to many times. She arrived 8 minutes late, which Jace had predicted almost exactly. She was a woman in her mid-40s, the kind of face that carries its worry visibly because it was not built for concealment. She sat down across from the mutual friend, and the mutual friend said, quietly, and with genuine care, "Linda, there's someone here who wants to talk to you." "She's safe, I promise." Linda Farrow looked across the room and saw Claire Dawson looking back at her. She went very still. Then she looked at the door. Claire spoke before she could calculate the distance. "Please don't," she said. Not loud, not commanding. "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm not here to report you. I'm here because I think you're scared, and I think you know things that are going to come out one way or another, and I think you deserve the chance to be on the right side of how they come out." Farrow looked at her for a long moment. Her hands on the table were not steady. "You're the nurse," she said. "I'm the nurse," Claire confirmed. They said, Farrow stopped. Looked at the table. They said it was just a warrant. It was legal. That you had actually done what they said. "You knew it wasn't legal," Claire said. "You work dispatch. You've been in that department for 14 years. You know what a legitimate warrant process looks like." She paused. "You know what a coordinated operation using the department's infrastructure looks like, because you've been watching it happen for however long you've been involved in this." Farrow said nothing. Her hands on the table had stopped moving. Something in her face had changed the particular expression of someone who has been found, who has been seen, and who is now making a decision about what to do with that. "Happens to me," she said finally. Her voice was small, voice of someone who has been holding something heavy for a long time and is not sure of the strength to set it down correctly. "Depends on what you know and what you're willing to say," Claire said honestly. "I'm not going to tell you it's going to be easy or that there are no consequences. I will tell you this. The federal investigation that is currently being built," she watched Farrow's eyes widen slightly, "has enough already to bring down Mitchell, Captain Haas, Trevor Ridge, and Gerald Foss. What it doesn't have is an insider account of how the coordination worked. Someone who can explain the communication structure, someone who can put the pieces together from the inside." "That's what I am," Farrow said, very quietly. "I know." Farrow looked at the table for a long moment. Claire waited. She had learned in 2 different lives, the most important thing you can do at certain moments is hold still and give space to what is trying to happen. "Mother-in-law," Farrow said finally, "he told me it was just business, that it was land development, that it was legal, that they just needed someone on the inside to monitor certain things and keep certain information moving." She stopped. "Nobody was going to get hurt. Did you believe him?" A pause. "First, when did you stop?" She looked up. Her eyes were wet, but the tears did not fall. "When I heard the radio traffic from your raid," she said. "I was on shift. I heard the officers going in, and I knew because I had processed a specific communication 3 days before about a nurse at Mercy General. I knew it wasn't what it was supposed to look like." She pressed her hands flat against the table. "I threw up in the bathroom afterward." Claire looked at her steadily. "Linda, I need you to talk to a lawyer today. Not tomorrow, after you think about it. Today. Her name is Sandra Voss. She is going to tell you exactly what your options are and exactly what cooperation means in terms of the federal process." "Linda," she leaned forward just slightly. "Whatever you decide, please understand that the window is closing. In 72 hours, the legal situation around this project changes significantly. After that point, your testimony becomes less valuable to the people who might protect you and more dangerous to the people who won't." Farrow stared at her. 22 hours, that's where we are. A silence. Outside, ordinary city sounds continued to exist with no awareness of what was happening at this table. Walking, cars moving, the world going about its business in the way the world does when it is not the one in crisis. "Hey," Linda Farrow said one word. Small. Enormous. "Hey," she said again. "I'll talk to her." Claire texted Sandra from under the table. "Farrow is coming in this afternoon. Make time." Sandra's response came in 4 seconds. Already cleared. The afternoon was a cascade of motion that had the quality of something that had been building pressure for a long time and was now releasing. There's federal contact, a man named Caldwell with the Department of Justice, who Sandra had described only as someone she trusted and who trusted results over politics, called Sandra at 2 in the afternoon. Claire was in the room for the call. She sat across the conference table from Sandra and listened to Sandra's half of the conversation and reconstructed Caldwell's responses from what she heard. But he had read the package, all 22 pages. He had shared it with a colleague who specialized in organized real estate fraud. The colleague had immediately recognized two of the structures from a case they had been unable to fully prosecute 2 years ago in a different state. Thus connected to Gerald Foss. Sandra listened. Nurse. She wrote, she said yes several times, and once said, precision that Claire recognized as controlled urgency. Claire Caldwell, the contract signing window opens in 48 hours, and we need a federal hold in place before that. What do you need from us to make that timeline work? She listened to the response. Then she wrote a list and turned the legal pad to face Claire. The list had 7 items. Physical documentation of evidence planting, signed witness statements from property owners, hospital log data with authentication, financial trace documentation with source verification, a statement from former Mercy General employee with specific knowledge of legacy system access, formal statement from a current law enforcement employee with insider knowledge of the coordination structure. 7th, any physical connection between Mitchell or Haas and a Silver Ridge payment. Claire read the list. Then she read it again. They had 1 through 5. She looked at Sandra. Pharaoh is 6. Pharaoh is 6, Sandra agreed. Then Claire said 7 is the problem. Sandra held her eyes. Payment to a sworn or recently sworn officer is the keystone. It makes everything else legally bulletproof instead of strongly suggestive. The Haas consulting payments through Meridian, the legal team at Silver Ridge will argue those were legitimate business relationships. Yes. We need something closer. How close? Bank records, or a physical transaction record, or a communication that explicitly connects a payment to a specific law enforcement action. Or something that cannot be argued as coincidence. Claire thought about Ryan Harwell, a pharmacy technician. The ghost account, $1,000 consulting payment to a company that did not exist before the hospital access was needed and had not apparently done anything since. About what Donna had said. He's one of them. I found 2 others. She thought about a man who had sold his dormant hospital credentials or had them used and who had been paid through a paper company. A man who was a link in a chain that currently had a gap in it. She reached for her phone, called Donna. Harwell, she said when Donna answered, $1,000 payment. Can you trace it to a bank account that connects upward, not to the subsidiary, to a person? Donna was quiet for exactly the kind of moment that means someone is deciding how much to say. I've been working on it since 6 this morning, she said finally. Her payment went through the subsidiary. The subsidiary's operating account received deposits from the main Silver Ridge account. The main Silver Ridge account has a co-signatory on it. She paused. A signatory is not Victor Hale. Claire gripped the phone. Aaron Mitchell, Donna said. Detective Aaron Mitchell is a co-signatory on the primary Silver Ridge operating account. Has been for 3 years. The room went very still. Sandra was watching Claire's face. Claire set the phone on the table and put it on speaker. That again, Sandra said. Donna said it again. That's the 7th item, Sandra said. She was already picking up her other phone, already dialing. Claire, I need you to do something. Name it. Mitchell still has your case file. He is still technically the investigating officer on your charges. I need you to be completely unreachable for the next 6 hours. Because when Caldwell moves on this, the first thing Mitchell will do is look for leverage. And the easiest leverage he has is you. Claire thought about this, about the logic of it. A man who has just learned that a federal hold is being placed, who feels the ground shifting, who needs to reassert control, reaching for the most immediate tool available, a pending criminal charge. A nurse he had arrested 3 nights ago who was supposed to be afraid and staying quiet. Where do I go? She said. Sandra was already writing an address on a piece of paper, slid it across the table. This is Caldwell's colleague's office. You walk in there with your original copies of everything the document Bloom gave you, your pharmacy log notes, your timeline, all of it, and you give a formal witness statement. You become part of the protected record. She looked at Claire directly. Once you're in that building, Mitchell cannot touch the case without federal oversight. You understand? I understand. Claire took the paper, at it for a moment. Then she looked at Sandra. What about Jace? Jace is not currently under any legal jeopardy. What Jace does is Jace's business. Sandra held her eyes. Tell him to stay clean for the next 6 hours. Wherever he's planning, keep it inside the lines. Jace is always inside the lines, I know. Well, I'm saying it anyway. Claire called Jace from the elevator on her way down. He picked up immediately. I already heard, he said. Called me. Sandra says stay clean for 6 hours. I heard that too. His voice was steady. There are 4 other members with me right now. Are people who drove through the night from different chapters, thinking about what we can do that is useful and legal and effective. He paused. To find Daniel Cho. She stopped walking. Jace, not for anything dramatic, to get him back here. I'm in a room with Sandra and Caldwell before the vote. He's the procedural voice on the land use board. If he surfaces and submits a formal objection on record before the council meeting, creates an additional administrative hold on the approval process. Completely legal, completely official. He paused. No one has to find him first. She thought about that. The planning official, whose wife had read from a note, the man who had asked Arthur Pina to come in for a meeting that Pina never reached, who had seen what was happening from the inside of the city's own structure and had tried to use its structure to stop it, and who had then disappeared in a way that was not quite visible enough to be alarming to anyone who was not already looking. Where are you going to find him? She asked. We have people in a lot of places, Jace said simply. That hasn't changed. She wanted to say something about the ethics of that, the line between resourcefulness and something that crossed into territory she had deliberately left behind. The line in her mind, and she examined where it was, and she decided that finding a frightened city official whose wife was reading from notes did not come close to crossing it. Tell me when you have him, she said. Will do. A brief pause. Going somewhere safe. Federal building, she said. As safe as it gets. Good. His voice shifted slightly, the way it did when he was done with the tactical portion of a conversation and the person was coming through. There, this is going to work. How do you know? Because you're running it, he said. I have never in 20 years watched you lose a thing you decided to fight for. She stood in the elevator lobby and held that for a moment, with sentiment, with the particular steadiness of someone who has been reminded of something true. Make me regret calling you, she said. Too late. Party don't regret it. She could hear the smile in his voice. Oh, we'll talk tonight, she went. The federal building had the particular quality of institutional weight that government buildings always have, the sense of process happening at a pace determined by something larger than any individual urgency. Caldwell's colleague, a woman named Agent Patricia Wren, out to be someone who had, apparently, already read the full package and decided that urgency was the appropriate response to it. She met Claire in the lobby. She shook her hand. She said, "Make a move as fast as this process allows," which in this case is faster than usual because what you've built is unusually solid. She said it without flattery, as simple professional assessment. I need your original documents and a 2-hour statement. Can you do that? I've been waiting to do that since 3 in the morning 2 days ago, Claire said. Almost smiled. Come with me. The statement took 3 hours, 2 because Wren was thorough and Claire was precise, and precision takes time. By the time they finished, it was 6:15 in the evening. Claire's phone had 17 messages she had not been able to check during the statement, and the sky outside the federal building's windows had gone from afternoon to early evening, in the way autumn days do quickly. Negotiating. She checked the messages in the elevator. Federal hold filed. Caldwell moved it. The contract signing window is suspended pending investigation. Pina's statement is done. He was incredible. And completely specific. Wren's team has it. Donna, account records certified by bank. 7 of 7 of everything. And then the one she had been waiting for, from a number she now recognized as one of the people traveling with Jace, is safe, driving back now, ETA 4 hours, he wants to talk. She read that last one 3 times. Daniel Cho. The man at the center of the planning process. Vote, the official who had tried to use the city's own systems to stop what was happening and had been removed from the board and put on administrative leave and had apparently not been visiting family out of state at all. He had been afraid. He had been somewhere he thought was safe, waiting to see which way things broke, carrying whatever he knew alone, the way Thomas Reed had carried it and Arthur Pina had carried it. The person who had been waiting for someone to tell them they were not alone. About what Jace had said, we have people in a lot of places. About the night she had called him, about the 6 years of silence before that call, about the deliberate distance she had maintained because she believed that the cleaner she kept her new life from her old one, the more real her new life would be. She was beginning to understand that she had been wrong about that. Not wrong to build the new life. Not wrong to want the peace and the purpose of the work she did at Mercy General. Work that was real and mattered and was entirely her own. Only in the belief that the two things could not coexist. But who she had been and who she had become were incompatible. The ring in the drawer was a thing to be hidden rather than simply a part of her. Present, quiet, waiting in the way that the people connected to it had waited. Resentment, without demands, with the patient loyalty of people who understood that a person's choices are their own, but the family remains. She put her phone in her pocket. She walked out of the federal building into the early evening air, and she looked at the street and the people on it, going about their ordinary lives, going home, going to dinner, walking without knowing what was moving invisibly through the systems around them. And she felt, for the first time in 3 days, something that was not urgency and was not fear and was not the tight-coiled readiness of a person managing a crisis, like herself, fully, completely. Both of her, there's the nurse and the woman before the source, standing in the same body on the same street at the same moment. Phone rang. It was Jace. She answered it. Cho wants to know if there's anything he can do when he gets back, Jace said. Like a man who has been sitting somewhere being useless for too long and is very done with it. Tell him Sandra is going to have a document ready for his signature. The moment he walks through the door, Claire said. Procedural objections submitted for the record before the council lot meeting. Tell him. She paused. Tell him he should have heard from someone sooner. Us, not on him. I'll tell him. A brief pause. Oz is going to hear about the federal hold tonight. And when he hears, he's going to call Mitchell. I know. And when Mitchell hears, he's going to do something, Claire said. What he does will tell us something we don't know yet about exactly how frightened he is and how much he thinks he has left to protect. A pause. You're using him as an indicator. I learned that from someone, she said. Look, she could hear him smile. Get tonight, she said. I'll rest tonight. She ended the call and started walking. She had 4 people waiting for her, Sandra Maria, their Pina, who had stayed because he said he wanted to understand what happened to the end, who had driven down from Bridgeport that afternoon, because some things you do not do remotely when you can do them in person. She had a federal hold on a contract. She had 7 pieces of evidence where she needed 7. She had a dispatcher who was going to give a formal statement that put the coordination structure on record. A planning official driving back through the night because someone had found him and told him that the people who wanted him afraid had miscalculated. She had the ring in her pocket. She had not made a decision about the ring. She was carrying it with her now, instead of leaving it on the table. That was something. That was, she thought, enough for tonight. Or else she walked faster towards Sandra's office. The people who were waiting because their work that was not finished and the fight that was not over. For the first time since the front door of her house had come off its hinges at 2:46 in the morning, she was not moving away from something. She was moving toward it. Daniel Cho arrived at Sandra's office at 11:47 that night. He came through the door looking like a man who had been compressed by something not broken, other than he should have been. The way people get when they have spent too many days being afraid in a quiet room with too much time to think. He was in his early 50s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and the particular exhaustion of someone who had not slept properly in 2 weeks. Looked around the room. Sandra behind her desk. There at the conference table. Maria, with her hands around a coffee cup, with 3 laptops open in front of her. Arthur Pina sitting very still in the corner, chair the way a man sits when he is conserving something, and he did not say hello. I thought I was going to get through the procedural objection before they figured out what I was doing. How long did you have? Sandra asked. 3 days, maybe 4. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair. I submitted the objection on a Wednesday. By Friday, I had a letter from the city manager's office telling me my position was under administrative review. Following Monday, my wife got a call from a man who said he was from the district attorney's office and wanted to discuss some financial discrepancies in my expense reports. He looked at his hands. There are no financial discrepancies. I had expense reports that were cleaner than anyone in that office. But it doesn't matter, does it? Because by the time you prove there are no discrepancies, what has already happened, and the contract is already signed. That's the playbook, Donna said from behind her laptops. She said it without looking up, the way someone says something they have been staring at for so long it no longer surprises them. Plus, move fast enough that the defense never catches up to the offense. Cho looked at her. What are you? I'm the person who found where Gerald Foss hides his money. She looked up. Nice to meet you. Something shifted in Cho's face. Tight relief. Something more complicated, the expression of a man who has been alone in a problem for a very long time and has just walked into a room full of people who understand exactly what the problem is without needing it explained. Sir? Daniel Clare leaned forward. I need you to tell me something specific. The procedural objection you submitted, was there anything in it beyond the standard land use objection? Or anything that pointed at the coordination between Silver Ridge and people inside the city administration? He looked at her. A footnote, he said. A reference to what I described as an irregular pattern of contact between the Silver Ridge development team and individuals within the permitting office. I had 3 documented instances, meetings that were not logged in the official contact record. He paused. A source inside the permitting office. Someone who told me what was happening because they were uncomfortable with it. Sandra set her pen down. I'm not telling you that unless they agree to it, Cho said. Firmly, without apology, they came to me in confidence. They're still employed there. If I put them in front of a federal investigator without their knowledge, I understand, Sandra said. She picked her pen back up. Is there a way to reach them tonight? Cho checked his watch. Then he looked at his phone. Then he made a decision that was visible in the set of his shoulders, the decision to trust the room he was in further than he had trusted anything in the past 2 weeks. He picked up the phone and dialed. The room went very quiet. It rang 4 times, then a voice, cautious and sleep-ruthened, answered. Cho said, it's Daniel. I'm sorry for the hour. I need you to listen to me for a moment, and then I need you to make a decision. He paused. Things have moved. There are people here, federal involvement, and what you know could make the difference between this stopping or not stopping. Another pause. I will not tell them anything you don't authorize. What has not changed? The voice on the other end said something that Claire could not hear. Cho listened. His face went through several things in the space of 30 seconds: relief, gratitude, and something that looked almost like the release of a breath he had been holding for 2 weeks straight. Oh. Thank you, he said. I'll put you on speaker. He set the phone on the conference table. Claire leaned forward. Donna was already typing. The voice on the phone was a young woman's, mid-30s by the sound, careful and scared and decided, in the way that Linda Farrow had been careful and scared and decided that afternoon. The way people are when they have passed the point of weighing and have arrived at the point of doing. My name is Renata Suarez, she said. I'm a senior permits coordinator in the city planning office. And I had to tell you about a conversation I was not supposed to hear. Renata Suarez had been working late on a Thursday evening 6 weeks ago in an office she was not supposed to still be in because the building had technically closed, because she was the kind of person who finished what she was working on regardless of the hour. She had heard voices in the conference room, adjacent to her office, a room that was also supposed to be empty. She had not set out to listen. She had set out to get her jacket from the hook near that room's door, which she had left there that morning and needed for the walk to her car. What she heard stopped her, with her hand on the doorknob. Victor Hale's voice. She knew it because he had been in the building 3 times in the past month for meetings she had been instructed to prepare materials for. And another voice, older, more deliberate, the voice of someone who ran meetings rather than attended them. She did not know that voice at the time. She knew it now as Donna had played her a recording of Gerald Foss speaking at a development conference 2 years ago. She had listened to that recording twice, and both times the same thing happened to the inside of her chest. There was the Foss. Gerald Foss in the conference room of the city planning office on a Thursday evening when the building was supposed to be empty, telling Victor Hale that the Cho situation was being managed and that the property owner timeline needed to accelerate because there was a council member who was getting uncomfortable. And that person also needed to be managed. Urged. The same word. She had stood with her hand on the doorknob and not breathed, and then she had walked away from her jacket and sat there for 20 minutes with her hands flat on the surface until the voices stopped, and she heard the conference room door open and footsteps move toward the elevator. She had called Daniel Cho. I didn't know what else to do, she said. Her voice through the phone was steady now that she was in the telling of it. The way voices stabilize when the decision to speak has been made and the speaking itself becomes the anchor. I knew Daniel had been raising procedural questions about the project. He seemed like someone who would understand what I was saying without making me feel crazy for saying it. You weren't crazy, Cho said. That now, a brief pause. I know that now, Renata, Sandra said. Are you willing to provide a sworn statement about what you heard? Silence. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Yes, Renata Suarez said. I've been willing since the night I heard it. I just needed to know someone was actually going to do something with it. Sandra looked at Claire across the table. It contained several things, all of them professional and precise, and carrying beneath them the particular satisfaction of pieces arriving exactly where they were needed at exactly the right moment. Loren's office, Sandra said to the room. First thing in the morning, she looked at Daniel Cho at once. She looked at Arthur Pina in the corner. There, he was watching the phone on the table with the expression of a man who has just heard something confirm what he has known for a long time in a way that makes the knowing real. I had stopped typing. She was looking at the phone too. But he was the one who spoke. Quietly, more to herself than the room, many people were just sitting on what they knew, waiting for somebody else to move first. It was not a question, an observation. The kind that arrives when you have spent enough time in a situation to see the full shape of it, not one corrupt operation targeting isolated victims, but a system designed to make people feel isolated so they would stay quiet, separating the witnesses from each other, making each one feel alone. As alone, people calculate the cost of speaking against the cost of silence. Silence wins until someone puts all the alone people in the same room. I thought, that is what this room is. All these people who had known something and said nothing and waited, but from the rational understanding that an individual voice against a coordinated machine does not carry. Pina, Maria, Farrow, Renata Suarez on a phone at midnight, Miss Reed whispering to a nurse before surgery, all of them waiting for the room to exist. She had built the room, with Sandra's legal mind, with Donna's financial precision, with Jace's network of people and places that formal systems could not reach, an old ring in her pocket that she still had not made a decision about, because some things you carry without deciding, because they belong to you whether you choose them or not. Buzzed. She looked at it. Jace, a text. Not 3 words this time. A full message, which from Jace meant it was important. There, Mitchell is moving. Informant inside the department says he left the building an hour ago. His car. Borrowed vehicle. He's not going home. You should know. She read it twice. Then she showed it to Sandra. Claire read it. Her face did not change. Ren, she said. Claire agreed. Sandra picked up her phone and called Wren's mobile number. It was nearly midnight. Wren answered on the second ring because apparently federal agents who had been handed a case involving an active corrupt law enforcement officer did not sleep until the officer was contained. Left the building an hour ago in a borrowed vehicle, Sandra said without preamble. We have reason to believe he is aware of the federal involvement and is not behaving in a way consistent with someone who is going home to wait for morning. Wren said something. Claire said, "That's our concern as well." Wren said something else. "Long?" Sandra asked. A response. Sandra looked at Claire. 20 minutes, she said. 20 minutes for what? She did not say, because the room had people in it who did not need to know the specifics of federal law enforcement protocols in progress. Claire understood. 20 minutes for someone to start actively monitoring where Mitchell was and where he was going, about what Mitchell might be trying to do. He had a pending criminal charge against her. That was his most immediate leverage. The federal hold in place, tampering with that case became a federal matter rather than a departmental one, which meant direct interference was too risky. What else did he have? She ran through it. He had Haas, but Haas was already implicated, and any contact between them right now made it worse for both. He had the dispatcher Farrow, but Farrow was already talking to Sandra's office, and Mitchell likely did not know that yet. He had Silver Ridge, which had its own lawyers and its own liability calculation, and which federal hold the places. The moment a federal hold was announced, would begin the process of deciding which people to sacrifice in order to protect the structure, which meant Mitchell was running out of assets. A man running out of assets makes different decisions than a man who believes he has control. I need everyone in this room to be somewhere that is not this building for the next few hours, Claire said, calmly, not to cause panic, because it was the correct assessment and everyone in the room was capable of receiving correct assessments without panic. Claire looked at her. You think he's coming here? I think this is the most visible location connected to the case. And this Sandra's name on the federal documents. A frightened man with a borrowed car and a shrinking window of options. I don't know what he's planning, but I know that being predictable right now is a liability. Sandra stood up, already gathering documents. Arthur. Renata, she's on speaker. Can you still hear us? Yes, Renata said from the phone. I need you to go somewhere other than your home tonight. A friend, a family member, anywhere. Can you do that? A pause. My sister, Renata said. She lives across town. Go there now. I'll take a direct route. I'll call you in the morning, couple. Cho was already on his feet. He had the specific alertness of someone whose adrenaline had just re-engaged after a long dormancy. Her wife, he said. Call her now. Have her meet you somewhere that isn't home. Text me the location and I will have eyes on it within an hour. Sandra looked at Donna. Oh, Donna said. She was already closing her laptops. 2 blocks. I'll check in under a different name. I'll keep working from there. She looked up. The financial documentation is already uploaded to Wren's secure server. If everything physical disappears tonight, the data is in federal custody. Good. Sandra looked at Claire. And you, I'm fine, Claire said. Claire, I'm not a target right now. Is not coming after me directly with a federal hold in place. That's the one thing that would guarantee his conviction. He knows that. She met Sandra's eyes. I'm going to call Jace on what's happening. And then I'm going to stay on the phone with Wren's office so that if Mitchell surfaces anywhere near anyone in this room, there's a direct line open. Sandra studied her for a moment. Of someone who is simultaneously running a legal operation, managing the safety of multiple people, and evaluating whether the person in front of them is being sensible or characteristically determined to be at the center of things. Fine, Sandra said. But Jace stays close. Jace is already close, Claire said. 2 streets over since 7 o'clock. Sandra blinked, and she closed her briefcase. Of course he has, she said. I'm cleared in 4 minutes. Maria left with Arthur Pina, offered without being asked to see her to her car because he was that kind of man. He was on the phone with his wife, walking fast down the hallway. Left with both laptop bags over her shoulders, looking like someone who had done fast exits before and found them unremarkable. He paused at the door. Call me every 30 minutes, she said. Every 30 minutes, Claire confirmed. Sandra left. And for a moment, Claire stood alone in the office with the quiet and the document files and the 3 coffee cups that had accumulated on the conference table. And she listened to the building around her, the hum of the elevator, the particular silence of a building after hours, the distant sound of a city that did not know what was moving through it tonight, and she thought, I was not afraid. That was something she had established clearly enough about herself in the past 3 days, that it no longer required examination. Alert, and alert was useful, and fear was not. Well, Jace, he answered before she heard it ring on her end. Oh, he said, I've been watching the building. Mitchell isn't here yet, but there's a car that has been idling at the end of the block for 20 minutes that I don't like. License plate already sent to Donna. In it. A pause. 2 of the people with me are former military. They're not going to do anything that crosses a line. There was her watching. Okay? Okay, she said. Claire was scared. Scared people do dumb things. I know. But scared people also do desperate things. And desperate is different from dumb. He paused. I need you to not be in that building. She thought about it. She looked around Sandra's office at the files, the coffee cups, empty chairs, where an hour ago there had been 6 people who had all, in their different ways, chosen to stop being alone in the same problem. What about Mitchell in a borrowed car, moving through the city with a shrinking list of options, and a man named Gerald Foss, who had, in situations like this in Kentucky and Tennessee, ways to make problems disappear before they reach the level of consequence. She said, I'm coming out. She gathered her legal pad, her phone, and the ring from her jacket pocket, checked it was there. Cause she checked. Didn't know why she checked. Did it anyway, and she turned off the lights in Sandra's office and walked to the elevator. It was empty. The security guard at the front desk was a man she did not know, which was fine. She walked past him, pushed through the front door. The night air hit her face, and she oriented immediately which direction was Jace, which direction was the idling car. Where were the other people? Jace's motorcycle was exactly where she had known it would be, behind a panel van 2 streets over in a position that offered sight lines to both the main entrance of Sandra's building and the street where the unfamiliar car was idling. Walked toward him without hurrying. Calm, purposeful. She was halfway there when her phone rang. Not Sandra. Not Ren. A number she did not recognize. Area code. She stopped walking. She answered. Listen. The voice was smooth, educated. The voice of a man who had spent a great deal of money making himself sound like someone who did not need to raise his voice to be heard. My name is Gerald Foss. I think we should have a conversation. Everything in Claire went very still. Gerald Foss, not Victor Hale, not Mitchell, not a lawyer or an intermediary. Foss himself, calling her direct, which meant he had her personal number, which meant the reach of what she was dealing with went further into her personal information than she had mapped. She kept her voice completely even. I'm listening, she said. I want you to understand something, Foss said. What has been built around this project has been built carefully over several years. It involved the officials, the officers. They made choices. Does that I facilitated but did not force. He paused. Foss had the quality of a man who is accustomed to being given space when he pauses. You, on the other hand, are someone who got caught in the middle of something that was never intended to be about you personally. You put my name in a document under assets to be neutralized, Claire said. It was personal. A brief silence. Something in his voice shifted slightly. Language was Victor Hale's. It reflects an enthusiasm that, in retrospect, was not well calibrated. What do you want? Mr. Foss? I want what any reasonable person wants at this stage of a complicated situation, he said. Understand what it would take to reach a resolution that does not require anyone to suffer consequences disproportionate to their actual involvement. Another pause. They're facing criminal charges. Charges that, as we both know, are without merit. I am in a position to ensure those charges are resolved favorably and quickly. Also in a position to ensure that your professional record at Mercy General is not only cleared but actively endorsed by the hospital's administrative review. He was offering her a way out, an exit. Her charges dropped, her record cleared, life returned to her in exactly the condition it had been before his people destroyed her front door. In exchange for walking away, she thought about Thomas Reed's hand on her wrist, about Arthur Pina's grandchildren playing on 7 acres every summer, about Maria Santos with a bag of planted evidence in her closet, about Renata Suarez standing with her hand on a doorknob, breathing, hearing a voice she would not forget, about Daniel Cho, about a journalist whose career was gone, a judge sitting on an advisory board, somewhere on a list, yet knowing what that meant. Mr. Foss, she said, I want you to listen to me carefully. Of course, the federal hold on your development contract was filed 4 hours ago. Financial documentation connecting your holding structure to payments made to sworn law enforcement officers is currently in federal custody. Hospital access log data showing systematic intrusion into Mercy General's legacy systems using ghost credentials has been certified and submitted. Property owners have given sworn statements. The city planning official is prepared to testify about the procedural obstruction. Licensed federal wiretap authorization. She was not certain about the wiretap, but she said it and kept her voice exactly level, has been filed in connection with communications between your organization and at least 2 law enforcement officers. She paused. He did not speak. What you are offering me, she said, a resolution. It is an invitation to participate in the obstruction of a federal investigation. And that is something I am not going to do. Another pause. Charges against me are going to be dismissed because the evidence was fabricated and we can prove it. My record is going to be cleared because the documentation supports it. Neither of those things requires anything from you. She let that sit for exactly 1 second. What requires something from you is the question of whether you cooperate with what is already in motion or whether you wait for it to arrive. A long silence. I spoke again. His voice had changed. Not dramatically. A shift, the kind that you hear only if you are listening for it. Of a man reassessing. You're quite composed for someone in your situation, he said. I've had a demanding few days, she said. Good night, boss. She ended the call. Her hands were steady, looked at them and confirmed it completely steady. And then she exhaled slowly and completely. Maybe she exhaled in surgical situations when something critical had gone correctly and she needed to return to baseline before the next thing. She looked up and Jace was walking toward her. He had seen her stop. He had watched her face through the call. He reached her and said nothing for a moment, but looked at her with the question in his eyes. Foss called me directly, she said. Eyebrows moved, just slightly, but she could read that slight movement precisely after 20 years of knowing him. It contained something between a Larsan, a specific cold assessment, contact. He's trying to stop this before morning. He's already too late, she said. He doesn't know that yet. She looked toward the street where the unfamiliar car had been idling. There? It left 7 minutes ago, right around the time your call started. He looked at her steadily. Ren's team picked it up 2 blocks away. They're tracking it. She thought about Mitchell. Road car. Knowing the federal hold was filed, maybe, from Foss, being told to stand down, told that the situation was being managed through a different channel. Or Foss not calling Mitchell, because Foss had already begun the calculus of which people to separate himself from in order to protect the structure. Because that was also in the playbook. It had to be a man who had survived 2 previous investigations without being formally implicated. He had people around him whose purpose was to create distance. Players to say the consulting relationships were legitimate. Paper structures to absorb the accountability. And Mitchell was not paper. There was a person with a bank account that had a co-signatory. We need Ren to know about the call, she said, already texting Donna. Jace had his phone out. She'll relay it, and we need someone physically present at Ren's office in the morning when Renata Suarez comes in. who is not connected to this case in any official capacity, but who makes it clear that this community is watching what happens. He looked at her. How many would you need? Enough to fill a lobby, to intimidate, just to be present, just to be visible. She paused. Who have a reason to care about a community that has been systematically picked apart by someone with enough money to make institutional systems do what he needed them to do. Jace put his phone away. Make some calls tonight. Jace. Cleaners? Visible. Claire. He looked at her with an expression that was 17 years of knowing her compressed into a single look. Have I ever made a mess when it mattered? She thought about it. Genuinely thought about it. No, she said, you haven't. Then trust me. She nodded. They stood in the street together for a moment. The borrowed car was gone. Everything behind them was dark. The city around them was doing its ordinary nighttime things. Someone's music from an upper window. A distant siren that was not coming for them. The sound of a neighborhood existing in the way neighborhoods exist when they do not know what has been happening beneath them. Buzzed. Sandra, she answered. Ren just called me, Sandra said. She sounded awake in the way that people sound when something has happened that made sleep irrelevant. Mitchell's borrowed vehicle was stopped by federal officers 20 minutes ago outside the home of Judge Eleanor Marsh. Claire closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Eleanor Marsh, the retired judge, Land Use Advisory Board, the list. Is she okay? Claire asked. She's fine. She's actually the one who called it in. She saw the car. She recognized something was wrong, and she called 911 from her bedroom window. By the time officers arrived, Mitchell was still there. He hadn't gotten out of the car. Sandra paused. Ren thinks he was working himself up to something. He never made a move, because he's not a man who is comfortable making physical moves, Claire said. She was thinking about him, about the comfortable smile. The man who ran operations and signed warrants and had other people plant evidence and used institutional machinery to do the heavy lifting. He was trying to figure out what to do, and he ran out of time. He is currently in federal custody, Sandra said, charged with criminal surveillance in connection with a federal investigation and obstruction of federal process. As a start, a brief pause. It's the start of a longer list. The weight of that settled. With triumph, Claire did not feel triumphant. She felt the particular gravity of something that has been prevented at a significant cost. The cost was real, even if what was prevented was worse. Us? She asked. His lawyers called Ren's office 30 minutes ago, Sandra said. Operation terms. Of course he was. Us was a man who survived by making the correct calculation at the correct moment. The correct calculation right now was that the structure he had built was compromised from enough angles that protecting it was no longer viable, which meant the next optimization was minimizing personal consequence, which meant the lawyers called before the federal officers could knock. Called me tonight, Claire said. I know, Donna told Ren. Getting into the record, another pause. Claire, for tonight, the immediate danger is contained. It was going to be its own thing. There's still the question of the city council vote, contract, and what Foss's cooperation terms include. But tonight, you can stop. She thought about stopping. About what stopping felt like after 3 days of continuous motion. She could not quite locate the sensation from memory. I'll be with your people, Sandra said. The words were precise and intentional, and Sandra Voss was not a woman who was imprecise by accident. Oh, your people, not Jace and his companions as an awkward element to be managed, but simply her people. The people who had come because she called. See you at 7, Claire said. 7 is fine. Right. The call ended. She looked at Jace. He was watching her with the steady, patient expression she had known for 20 years. About the calls he had made tonight. The people who had driven overnight. Network of men and women, not criminals, not now. And in her experience, not really ever, in the way that the word implied, who had shown up because their community asked them to. Federal is in custody, she said. Federal. He nodded slowly. Not surprised. Relieved, the quiet way that solid people are relieved, not with explosion, but with the careful setting down of something they have been carrying. Others with you, she said. They've been here all day. All day, he confirmed. I want to talk to them, she paused. Not to debrief or strategize. I want to talk to them. He turned and made a small gesture that she recognized from years ago as the one that meant, come. They walked together to where the others were positioned. By one, they materialized from where they had been watching the building. The streets, angles, four people, different ages, different shapes, each of them carrying the particular alert calm of someone who had spent hours ready to respond to something that ultimately did not require them to respond and was grateful for that. They stood in a loose group on the pavement. One of them, a big man in his 50s named Walt, who Claire vaguely remembered from 15 years ago. Okay? I'm okay, she said. Case looking good? Case is looking very good. He nodded. Like that settled it. Like the answer to those two questions was the complete necessary information, and anything beyond them was superfluous. I looked at the four of them and felt something that was not sentiment, but was adjacent to it, the recognition of people who had gotten into borrowed cars at an hour's notice and driven through the night and spent a day watching a building in the cold because someone who used to be one of them asked. Her, she said. And because she was not a person who said things she did not mean, all of you. Thank you. Walt family, he said. Like that explained everything, because it did. She reached into her jacket pocket and her fingers found the ring. About it for a moment, the familiar weight of it, the worn smoothness of the design, the specific object that she had carried all day without deciding what to do with it. She looked at it in her palm. She thought about the drawer it had been in for 6 years, about the morning she had put it there, the deliberate act of it, the statement she was making to herself about who she was going to become. She had needed to make that statement. It had been true and necessary, and she did not regret it. She thought about what she had learned in the past 3 days about the relationship between who you are and who you were. Those two things were not opposing forces requiring a choice. How the ring in the drawer had not made her less of a nurse, and the nursing badge around her neck had not made her less of the woman who had once known how to lead people through impossible things. Were true. Both had always been true. She looked at the ring for a long moment. She put it back in her pocket, not into a drawer. Her pocket, hers where it would stay for now, her present without performance, hers without declaration. That was enough. That was actually exactly right. Come on, Jace said. Let's find somewhere open and get something to eat. All of us. It's almost 1 a.m, she said. The diner 4 blocks from here that I found this afternoon, he said. Open. I checked. He looked at her with the small particular smile of a man who had been planning this for several hours. And before you say, you're not hungry, you haven't eaten since noon. No, because I asked Maria. She stared at him. I told Maria to ask if I'd eaten. Someone has to, he said. She shook her head. But she was walking. All 6 of them were walking. Jace, Claire, Walt, and the other 3, whose names she was going to ask about properly over food, her, as she should have done hours ago. Walking together through a quiet, late-night neighborhood toward a diner that was open at 1 a.m, because the immediate crisis was contained and the work was in good hands for tonight. And sometimes the most important thing you can do after holding a situation together for 3 straight days is eat something and sit with the people who showed up. About tomorrow. About Agent Wren's office in the morning, Suarez's sworn statement and Daniel Cho's formal procedural objection, going into the record before the council vote, what Foss's cooperation might or might not mean for the people he had used and would almost certainly now use differently. About Thomas Reed, who was home somewhere, their Pina, who was with Maria tonight. She thought about Linda Farrow, who had sat across from her in a coffee shop and said, okay, in the voice of someone putting to something they should never have been asked to carry. About her house, the front door that a locksmith had temporarily fixed, the drawer in the bedroom that was empty now, the hospital where 1517 now, on the current, she had heard colleagues had written statements before they even knew what she was building. About the operating room, about her hands, what those hands were for. She thought about all of it, for the 3 minutes it took to walk 4 blocks to a diner that was warm and lit and smelled like coffee and bacon grease in the ordinary middle of the night. And then she sat down and she looked at the menu, the largest breakfast they had, and she listened to Walt telling a story that was apparently very funny based on the response of the people around the table who already knew the punchline. And she laughed at the right moments because the right moments were obvious, and laughter, it turned out, was not something she had to remember how to do. It came back immediately, like it had been waiting. 3 weeks later, Sandra called at 7 in the morning, the same hour she had called every morning since the night Mitchell was taken into federal custody, and this time her voice carried something different. Urgency, not the tight, forward-leaning energy of someone managing an active crisis. Think quieter than that. The specific tone of a person delivering the last piece of a thing that has been built carefully over a long time. Sandra said. Claire was standing in her kitchen. Her front door was repaired now, a real repair, not the locksmith's temporary fix, wood and a NAR frame that the new contractor had installed 5 days ago. She had chosen the same style as the original because she liked it, because she refused to let the memory of what had been done to it change what she wanted her house to look like. All of it, Claire said. All of it. The charges against you were formally dismissed this morning. Entered the order at 6:50. The dismissal is with prejudice. That means they cannot be refiled. Sandra paused. Buzz had the weight of something that deserved a moment of silence before what came next. Old Foss accepted a federal cooperation agreement yesterday evening, providing full testimony against the network he built across 3 states. And Haas were indicted on 14 counts each. The city council vote on the Silver Ridge rezoning was tabled indefinitely pending criminal investigation. Claire set down her coffee cup. She looked at the table, at the space where the ring had sat the night she called Jace. It was not there anymore. It was in her pocket, where it had been every day since. Miss Reed, she said. Arthur Pina, protected. Development contract is void. The federal injunction covers all 40 acres in the corridor. Nobody is touching any of it. Sandra let that land before she continued. Daniel Cho has been reinstated to his position with a formal written apology from the city manager's office. Her DUI charge was reviewed and dismissed when the coordinated pressure campaign became part of the federal record. Judge Marsh submitted a letter to the federal court commending the investigation. Another pause. Suarez received a commendation from the city planning department this morning. Her supervisor apparently had no idea she was going to get it, which means someone above her supervisor made the call. Claire was quiet for a moment. About Renata Suarez standing at a doorknob not breathing. A woman who had heard something she was not supposed to hear and had chosen to tell someone about it and had waited alone for something to happen. Getting a commendation that came from somewhere above the person who should have given it to her months ago. Maria, Claire asked. The internal complaint she filed has been reopened and assigned to an independent reviewer. The physician she filed it against is on administrative leave pending the review. Sandra's voice was precise, and even her record at the hospital is fully intact. Linda Farrow? A breath. Farrow's cooperation agreement was finalized. She will face a misdemeanor charge related to her facilitation of department communications. The federal prosecutor is recommending minimal sentencing given the scope and value of her cooperation. Sandra paused. She asked me to tell you something. What? She said she's sorry she didn't do it sooner. Claire looked at her kitchen window. Ordinary morning outside it. At the world going about its business in the way it always did without fanfare. Acknowledgement of what had happened inside the systems that were supposed to protect it. Tell her I understand, Claire said, and tell her she did it when it mattered. Sandra was quiet for a beat. Oh, there's one more thing. Tell me. The hospital board met yesterday afternoon. Kaplan presented the full account of your record, investigation findings, and the federal case documentation. Sandra paused in the specific way. She paused when she was about to say something that was going to require the other person to take a moment. I offer you the lead trauma nurse position. Department head level. It's been open for 2 months. They didn't announce it broadly because they were waiting to see how your situation resolved. Claire held the phone very still against her ear. She had not expected that. She had expected her job back, her record cleared, a return to the work she had built over 10 years. She had not expected to be handed something larger than what she had before. Kaplan recommended me, she said. Kaplan wrote 4 pages, Sandra said. I'm spaced. He concluded with the sentence, I cannot identify a more qualified candidate, and I have been looking for 3 years. A brief pause. A man who writes 4 pages about something he's uncertain about. No, Claire said. He's not. She thought about the operating room, her hands, about the specific purpose of the work, not the title, not the level, but the actual thing itself. People in the worst moments of their lives, heightened, in pain, needing someone who does not panic, who moves with purpose, who holds the situation together by being exactly the person they need in exactly the right moment. She had been doing that for 10 years. She could do it better. Kaplan, yes, she said. Tell him I'll be in on Monday. I'll tell him, Sandra said. Without her usual crispness, with something warmer underneath it. There. You built this, every piece of it. I want you to know that. We built it, Claire said. All of us, yes. But you made the call. The call ended. She stood in her kitchen for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and called Jace. He answered on the first ring the way he always did. And she could hear road noise behind him, which meant he was already moving, already, somewhere, already doing the next thing the way he always had. She said. All of it a pause. She heard the road noise change slightly. All of it, he said. All of it. He was quiet for a moment. Real quiet, not tactical, not assessing. The quiet of a person who has just heard something that settles something in them. He said finally. The single word carrying everything it needed to carry. Thank you, Jace. She said it plainly, without qualification. For all of them. You know what I'm going to say. Family, she said. He confirmed. She heard him smile through the phone. It exactly the way it had always sounded. Across 20 years and all the distance she had put between them and everything that distance had contained. Some things did not change. That was not a weakness. She had finally understood the point. The ring, he said. What are you going to do with it? She reached into her pocket, put it in her palm, looked at it the way she had been looking at it every day for 3 weeks, not with the old ambivalence, not with the feeling that carrying it meant something she had to decide about. Just looking at it, just letting it be what it was. To keep it, she said. Not to wear, not to put back in the drawer. Just keep it. That's right, Jay said. That's exactly right. She closed her hand around it and put it back in her pocket. That afternoon, she walked through the front door of Mercy General for the first time in 3 weeks. Her badge, a new one, reissued that morning by Patricia Bloom, who had handed it over with both hands in a gesture that was small and deliberate and meant something. She clipped it to her scrubs. She washed her hands at the sink outside the trauma bay. She pushed through the door. 17 of her colleagues were at their stations, moving through the ordinary business of the department. One by one, without stopping what they were doing, ceremony or announcement, they looked up and they nodded. Or they said her name. Or they simply held her eyes for a moment in the way that people do when words are not the point. Her Kaplan was at the whiteboard. He turned when she came in. He looked at her for exactly 1 second. Then he handed her a marker and turned back to the board. We have 3 incoming from a highway accident, he said. ETA 7 minutes. Tell me how you want to position the team. She took the marker. At the board, she told him. And Claire Dawson, nurse, survivor, the woman who had been underestimated by people who should have known better, who had built 2 lives and refused to abandon either one. The people she loved when she needed them and stood for the people who could not stand alone, went back to work. Because the past was gone, because it was hers. All of it. Every version of her, every choice, every ring in every pocket, every hand she had held in the worst moment of someone's life. All of it had made her exactly who she was. And who she was, enough, more than enough. She was the woman they had tried to erase, and she was still here,